What's your "if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me" story? I was rock climbing and this guy who was my belayer for the day was kind of a jerk. Well, no surprise, the guy spends most of his time flirting with a cute girl who's friendly but seriously not into him. He gets chewed out by our lead for not paying attention, which means he continues to not pay attention as he's incapable of picking up cues. Well, there's me, 25 feet or so off the ground with my rope slack and feeling my hands slipping because I'm just running out of steam. Now, having told him 3 times to pick up the slack, I look down and I see that he's completely ignoring me to chat with this girl again. My mistake was looking down as I reached to readjust my weakening hold and I slipped. The rope shoots out of his limp, sausage-like fingers and I begin to fall. I know a properly tied-off rope shouldn't do that, and I guess he messed that up too. My only thought was, if I'm going to fall, I'm gonna damn well land on him. Well, I did. I landed straight on his cushy jerk body. I was barely injured, by the way. He was taken to hospital after having 80-odd kilos of me land on him from 2 stories up. You know, I never happened to see him at that rock climbing club again. Wow, I mean, you took the going down quite literally here. I once worked for a startup company and they missed one of my paychecks. It wasn't a gigantic deal to me because they were a bit strapped for cash and we had a big release coming soon, and I was decently paid anyway, so I just said, screw it. They then fired me 2 days before release, making it sound like I'd been inadequate despite zero indication from them that I was such before that day. So I made the proper legal arrangements to recoup my missing paycheck and told them I'd be going to Labor and Industry. I'd already filed a complaint. Because if they were going to fire me out of nowhere after I worked 70 hours a week for over a month to try to meet their deadlines, I sure as frick wasn't going to cut them the slack of an entire paycheck. I got my paycheck, they went out of business because they were corrupt and had been misusing investor funds for years, and this was unbeknownst to me by the way, and I laughed all the way to the bank. When I was stationed in Korea, my sergeant threatened to tell command I was drinking underage. Fortunately, I had pictures of our squad drinking and he was present in them, so I told him I'd show them to command if he told on me. Checkmate, Sarge. Now hand me another beer. Whenever you're going to turn someone in for a crime, make sure there isn't direct photographic evidence of you being completely complicit in it. I'm notorious in my friend group for having a fear of water. I'm okay in pools since you can hopefully see the bottom, but even shallow lakes, rivers, and oceans are a no-go for me. Some of my friends ended up renting a boat and they wanted to take it out on the lake and begged me to come out. I kept telling them no way in heck would I ever willingly go out and sit in the middle of a lake. Finally, I caved because, I don't know, they were friends and they really wanted me to go. Someone said it could help me face my fears. Even though I didn't plan on getting in the water, I'm not going to wear jeans to the sunny beach, so I left my wallet, keys, and phone in the car. Within 10 minutes of getting to the middle of the lake, the buddy who suggested I face my fears, and I think his brother, asked me if I've got the time. I shrug and tell them I left my phone back in the car. They both lunge at me and start throwing me overboard. I latch on for dear life and fight as if the river is lava because to me, essentially it is. I eventually realize that I'm going in 100% and there's nothing I can do. So, I let go of the railing I was gripping onto and instead grab them both as I'm pulled back and I force all 3 of us into the water. Getting back on the boat was easy. It had a little ramp and ladder for climbing in and out, and you can bet your butt I was the first one climbing back up. The brothers were mad at me because they had their phones in their pockets and I ruined them. But everyone else quickly pointed out that they pushed me in the water knowing I hated it, and they deserved it. They argued that they intentionally tried to make sure I didn't have anything electronic on me, but everyone shut them down. They were allowed back on the boat when they apologized. My friend apologized and I actually did chip in to help him get a new phone later, but his brother swam back to shore and got even more upset and demanded I pay for his new phone since I helped his brother. But he didn't feel bad or think he did anything wrong, so screw that guy. When I worked as a case manager as an MHMR, we had a new department supervisor come in and she was the worst. Every single person but myself and another case manager quit within the month of this woman starting. I really liked my job and it was also my internship site for my master's degree, so I needed to stay employed there. Since so many people quit, this lady got permission to hire, and it soon became obvious that she wanted to get rid of anyone she hadn't hired and have a department full of people she had personally chosen. Surprise, surprise, most of her hires were crappy, just like her. On top of being an awful human, she also had very little background in mental health and gave truly awful supervision when it came to clients and getting them the services they needed. Since I wasn't a part of the people she had hired, I knew she'd try to get rid of me, so I made sure to document everything. Anytime I staffed a client with her, I'd document her advice in that person's chart, as well as the actions I took due to her advice. I also kept a detailed paper trail and would email her questions about policy so that I'd have a record of her answers, which usually were the opposite of what our policy actually was. She'd even start walking to my desk to verbally give me answers to the questions I sent via email, and I'd have to make up some excuse as to why I needed her answer in an email. Like, I'd tell her a parent or a client had asked and I wanted to be able to give them a verbatim answer, and I could tell that she hated that. Anyway, several months later, I staffed a client with her who I believed needed to be hospitalized, and I wanted to run it by her first as she demanded. The kid had a number of highly dangerous and volatile issues that I believed were a ticking time bomb. She disagreed that this kid needed hospitalization and told me to refer the client to another agency because apparently the client was too high risk for us. Too high risk, but didn't need to be hospitalized? I tried to get her to agree to just call in crisis to assess her, but she denied that as well. I documented what she had told me to do and referred out. Well, literally a day later, this kid brings a piece to school and gets in a ton of trouble, obviously. Thankfully, he was stopped as soon as he stepped through the metal detectors. His mom is angry that my agency just referred him and didn't get him the help he needed, and that a day later he went to try and blast up his school. My supervisor's supervisor is angry as this is a PR nightmare and comes down on my supervisor, but since I was the direct care staff assigned to this client, she blamed it all on me. I ended up getting fired for my, quote, negligence. However, the higher-ups, of course, carefully went through the kid's records and saw all of my documentation regarding the awful decisions my supervisor had made, which led the higher-ups to investigate even more. Basically, there was Medicaid fraud being committed, this lady was lying about her mileage, and being reimbursed way more than she should have been, and all this other lovely stuff. So she was fired as well. I was asked to come back, but frick that place and frick its corruption. When I was in the 8th grade, we had to create a presentation on a book we'd just read, including a skit from one of the scenes. Here's the best part. We were forced to work in groups. Being an introvert, I hate group work. What I hate even more is when your group mates don't do their work. The day we were assigned the project, we decided to divvy up the slides equally. It was a Google Slides, so we could all contribute to the same document. The class ended, and I'd already finished one of my slides. One boy only changed the color of his title, and the other two didn't do anything. 2 days later, I'd finished all of my slides. No one else had done anything. I offered to start the script for the skit since I'd finished, and asked for the others to contribute. Nothing. A couple more days passed, I'd finished the skit as well, and all of the other slides were still empty. Finally, the night before the assignment was due came, I'd hoped that even a title had been added. The slides were still empty. I finally decided to just finish it myself. I was up until about midnight and the slides were not the best quality. And finally, the presentation day comes. Of course, my group mates felt absolutely no remorse for doing no work. It was our turn to present, and my group mates nominated me to present. I finally decided to show them the consequences of their actions. I told them that we were all to present the slides we were supposed to work on. They obviously didn't know what they were doing and were extremely unprepared. My grade went down, but theirs went down even more. There's an old university saying, "At my funeral, I want my group project members to be my pallbearers so they can let me down one last time. We all salute you for lurching out of the coffin and punching them all in the twig and berries on the way down, author." When I was in university, I did a 6-month exchange program in Spain. I took 4 classes while I was there, and all had an equivalent credit at my university in Canada. I was getting A's on all of my classes except one class where I was really struggling, and getting a failing grade on an assignment in that class finally broke me. The professor of this class was the worst. It was an intermediate Spanish class, and he was marking us like he thought we should all be writing Shakespeare. Not only that, but how he told us to complete assignments versus how he marked them would be completely incongruent. He expected us to be doing things that he never taught us, and he shouldn't have been expecting in the first place from an intermediate Spanish class. I realized it wasn't just my problem when the girl from France, whose Spanish was far better than anyone else's, started crying one day after she got an assignment back and begged to understand why she was marked so poorly. He just pointed at her assignment like it was the only explanation required and then ignored her after that. There was no way to drop the class or switch into another one because of the way it was built into the exchange program, so I decided I'd start emailing the teacher constantly after he gave us assignments, clarifying every little point, coming back with follow-up questions to try and figure out what the heck it was he actually wanted from us. I was spending way more time on assignments than they deserved. This way, if I failed, I'd have this record showing how hard I was working in the class to bring to an administration if I needed to fight it, and all the discrepancies between how he provided assignments versus how he marked them. A couple of days before the final exam teacher evaluation forms came around, I could tell by how long it took us all to turn them in that I wasn't the only one in class unloading on this guy. This was his first semester teaching at the university, so if his teacher evaluations didn't go well, he wouldn't be invited back. If I failed this class, then at least that jerk wouldn't be doing this to someone else next semester. We get our final marks a week later, and I've managed to pull a C- out of my butt. Great, just squeaks by. Then with final marks dispersed, he's allowed to see his teacher evaluations. He sent an email to the entire class that night and lost his fricking mind. We're talking about sections with all caps, multiple exclamation marks, telling us how stupid we all are, and how we don't know what we're talking about. How he's the greatest teacher alive and we're all just bad students. Complete meltdown. The next morning, I found another email from the university this time, stating that Professor Jerkface is no longer with the university and won't be welcome back again, followed by numerous apologies regarding his behavior. I inquired about our grades in light of what happened, but I guess they weren't that apologetic because they refused to change them. Go figure. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Current job, previous manager. I was on a team of 2 when the lady I worked alongside with quit, and they decided not to replace her. I have a young child who, as children so often do, gets sick a lot. Being the only person on my team, and the most important role of our office to function, since it's literally the first step in all of our processes, I had a very hard time whenever I used my paid time off with a short notice. I'd given my manager multiple ways to fix the issue, but she'd never hear any of it. She also was in a remote office, so she had zero clue what I did with my day. She finally sent me a very angry email, basically telling me I couldn't use my paid time off for emergencies all the time when my son got sick. I wrote back, detailed a list of every method I suggested to fix the issue, along with the fact that I was the only person in my position for months, and that our company policy states in bold letters that using paid time off because you or your loved one is sick is not only acceptable, but encouraged. My manager responded to my email by stating that she had forwarded my concerns to HR and that I should probably polish up my resume. But HR was in our office that day, for the first time in 6 months. Great coincidence, right? So I went in, asked if I could speak about an issue concerning my manager, and explained everything as it happened. The HR rep had this look on her face like she was going to murder someone. She asked me to forward the entire email chain to her, which I did. Then she called me back in to talk to her. A few people I talked to were aware that the manager and I had issues, and the lead of every team in our office basically told the HR rep that the entire office can't function without me, and that I've been doing the work of 3 people for 9 months. Later that day, my manager sent me a very angry message over email, basically saying I was fired and that I was to pack my things immediately for failing to do my job and because I was causing a hostile work environment. I forwarded this to the HR rep and then walked to her office and asked if I should pack my stuff. She looked at me and in a single sweet sentence said, "Not a chance, she's royally effed." And that's basically how my manager went from making $80K a year to being fired on a Wednesday with no compensation, no benefits, and no way to collect unemployment. All around, a productive day. My dad pushed me into the pool, but before I fell in, I grabbed his arm. In 7th grade, my teacher decided to use process drama to teach about the events leading to persecution of certain peoples in Germany before World War II. He told us we could hide anywhere in the building, and if we successfully evaded him looking for us, we'll get a bunch of extra credit. Conversely, if we're caught, we'll get 5 points for each other classmate we rat out. I hid successfully in the computer class under a spare TV cart that could barely fit me. My soon-to-not-be friend had chosen poorly in the same room and was easily found. Upon walking out, I very clearly remember him yelling, "Wait! Yams is in the corner under the cart." I can't remember being so mad at someone before. I was ratted out for a mere 5 points. I yelled at him and definitely overreacted. The lesson being a process drama, that was kind of the point. To experience the fear and potential rage at your neighbors ratting you out. For those of you who don't know, this lesson's style is to give students first-hand emotional connection to whatever content you'd like to teach. It's incredibly effective. In short, I was taken down along with a classmate, and I lost my extra credit. That's actually a really good and memorable way to demonstrate to a student certain things about humanity, and maybe strengthen their resolve to not be the bad guys in the future. Practical lessons like this are still some of my strongest memories from classes from school. I was at a church camping trip for boys at Yosemite. One of the guys in charge was new and a real D-bag. He made it his goal in life to punish every kid. I was a real rule follower, so he couldn't punish me and started actually getting angry about that. He'd even drop comments like, "Your turn is coming." Now, when I was younger, I was really thin and small, but in my mind I was like all the other kids and mentally tough, so this got me in trouble. I'd get injured in these trips, and the head guy was always getting in trouble with my parents for not keeping me safe. So one of the rules is that nobody can ever be alone. If you're caught alone at any time, you're in trouble. So we're getting the campfire ready for lunch, and some kid comes running up to the group and says that there's an undressed woman bathing in the river. All of the other kids get up and run to go see. So to not be alone, I have to go with the group. Now, I don't go to the edge and look because I didn't feel like it was right to go spy on some poor woman just trying to enjoy nature. Anyway, D-bag leader sees this as an opportunity and says that since I got up and went over with the group, I was also in trouble, despite the fact that I had no other choice. Punishment at this camp was holding a giant rock over your head. Somehow I was the only one that got in trouble. Not everyone else that looked, proving that he didn't care about actual rules, but just that he had power over everyone. I was supposed to hold this rock over my head for 15 minutes and then come back. Of course, he was too lazy to oversee punishments, so I was supposed to do this alone. Which is another problem since there are bears and preverts around. No kid is supposed to be alone there. Finally, since I didn't deserve the punishment, I decided I was going to take this guy down. So I dropped the rock on my head on purpose. Then I just laid there. I could feel a large bump rising on my head. I must have laid there for about 35 minutes. Finally, they realized I didn't show up for lunch, and someone asked where I was, and then everyone ran over to see me laying there with a rock next to my head. I said that the last thing that I remembered is that my arms were getting weak holding the rock over my head. Then the leader checked my head and found the bump. He was livid because now he had to tell my mom I got hurt again. When asked why I was holding a rock over my head, I made sure to let them know that it was the D-bag leader's punishment. He tried to deny it, but 25 young voices called him a liar simultaneously, since they'd all endured the same punishment. D-bag leader was stripped of his power and spent the rest of the camp as just another camper. In fact, he called someone and left a day early. It was his first and last activity with the group. My uncle used to own a hardware store in our crappy little town. He wanted to put up a cover between two buildings that he owned, but the town council wouldn't let him. They never gave any real reason, like we need to leave the area uncovered because of XYZ building codes. They just went on a power trip and said, "You're not gonna do it." Eventually, due to some other power trips, my uncle threatened to move his shop a few towns over. The town council went, "You're not gonna do it," in a kind of a "I dare you" way. So my uncle did just what he was saying he'd do. If I remember correctly, he paid the most in taxes, so all the money the town was getting from him disappeared. Most of his employees were in high school and couldn't drive. When he moved, the kids went with him. Since the parents had to drive their kids to their job, they decided they'd also pick up groceries and other things they needed while they were in the new town. So the clothing shop and grocery store went out of business. Since no one could get what they needed in our small town, just about everyone moved. Now the town is run down and there's barely anything there. My dad said it used to be a nice little town. Now hardly anyone lives there and everything is falling apart. My uncle even warned the council if I leave I'll take this town with me, but they didn't listen. My next-door neighbor kept picking my plum tree dry when I'd go out of town, so I just cut it down out of frustration. No plum jelly for anyone. I had a group project I had to do with 4 other people. 3 of the 4 were great, but there were roles each of us had to fill in the group for the project to work right. The final girl never once participated in the project, so her role was completely empty and it was dragging the rest of us down. We just couldn't fill in for her either because she kept her specific instructions to herself. The other 3 and I did the best we could, but our instructor didn't seem impressed. We had a few questions about how we came to our conclusions and who did what in the group. The other 3 were trying to keep focus on the roles they filled out, but the instructor was asking about the role that the other girl skipped out on. I answered that we didn't have anything from that role because What's-Her-Face didn't come to any of the project sessions. We just did what we could without her. Up until that point, the girl that didn't do anything was standing there acting like she deserved the same grade we all got. Once I said something, the other 3 girls confirmed that yes, Becky's butt did 0% of the work. She tried to say she was just really busy, but another girl shut her down by saying she saw her at several parties the past couple of weeks. That girl got a 0, and the rest of us got like an 85 or around that number. I felt like a snitch, but screw Becky. Growing up, my best friend and I got in trouble for cutting up brand new, expensive jeans to make shorts. Her mum was rightfully screaming at me, so I said, "What about your daughter? She asked me to and handed me the scissors." And I got us both grounded, so at least we could sit together in her room.
Fast food workers, what should we never order from you? At Starbucks, don't order something from the secret menu. We don't know what a Snickerdoodle Frappuccino is, as it's not a menu item. Employees would be more than happy to make you a drink if you just explain the recipe rather than the name of it. I'll make you diabetes in a cup if you just tell me what you want in there. Just don't get mad at me for not knowing a whole menu customers created. Salads from DQ are a ripoff. They just recently downsized them while changing the bowl to make it look like the same amount. Over $5 for 3 ounces of old lettuce, cabbage, carrots, and even older grilled chicken. I used to work at Chipotle and never, ever order the tacos. You get less than half the regular portions. Instead, order a bowl with whatever you want in it, then ask for the taco shells, hard or soft, on the side. When I was there, the shells were free to get on the side. I used to work at 7-Eleven, so I'm gonna say any of the taquitos or hot dogs around midnight up through about 4 or 5 a.m. Around midnight, you can be almost assured that these are now high mileage. The hot dog might have more miles than your car. If you're really short on time, don't count on chicken tenders or grilled chicken sandwiches or salads being made quickly at Burger King. I remember that the tenders took forever to cook, and we didn't really make them that often, so most times they were made to order. Same for the grilled chicken. I work at Buffalo Wild Wings. Don't get anything other than the wings. That's the only quality thing there. Everything else is frozen. I worked at an Auntie Anne's Pretzels, and typically at these, there's a window and people can see you rolling the pretzels. I want to point out for us that it was more sanitary to not use gloves over using them. We'd get customers complain about it, but it's actually written in our rules that we don't have to use them. It's perceived to be cleaner. When we didn't use them, we washed our hands much more often, and it didn't matter anyway because bacteria got killed off in the 600-degree Fahrenheit ovens. From after the oven and onwards, no hands are involved, and you're using tongs to transfer product around to pretzel sleeves. The only thing I can say is that sometimes the pretzel dogs or hot dogs can be icky when you don't order one fresh. When they sit in the warmer, they shrivel up and get all chewy. If you see something on the menu and can't find at least 1 or 2 other items that the ingredients could be used in, don't order it. For example, my restaurant has a pulled pork sandwich. We don't use the pork for anything else. Since it's not ordered too frequently, it's not fresh, and the product you're eating might be days or weeks old. It's not going to get you sick, but it definitely won't be as fresh as the other things on the menu. I worked at a Japanese casual fast food restaurant, and we had this thing called a volcano roll. It cost $7.25. A California roll there cost $3.75. The volcano roll was a Cali roll cut in the shape of a triangle and topped with spicy mayo that had been heated up, with about 10 cents worth of fish. Literally just a few bits. You're much better off ordering a Cali roll and paying the extra 50 cents for the spicy mayo on the side and asking them to heat it up. I had one guy come in with his girlfriend and ordered a volcano roll, and when served in the restaurant, unless they ask us, we put it on top so it looked nice, like a volcano. When I brought it over, he was like,
"Oh, I didn't know you guys put the sauce on. I've only gotten it for pickup and the sauce is always on the side. I don't really like it. Could you bring me one without one?"
I tried not to laugh and said sure. I went back and the sushi chef asked what was wrong. I told him that he didn't like the sauce and wanted one without it. He laughed and said all right, so he took a Cali roll, cut it up, and put it on a plate. I brought it back to the guy and he was super pumped. Basically, this guy paid $7.25 for a roll that would have cost him $3.75, and me and the sushi chef got to split a free volcano roll. Do movie theaters count? I'd say pretty much everything is fair game unless your manager is a jerk. We rotate hot dogs regularly, throw out the ones that have expired, and put new ones out. Nachos can get pretty iffy if the day's been slow. Sometimes we'll have the same nachos in a warmer that have been there since that morning. Jimmy John's. If you're trying to order a healthy option, don't order the Gourmet Veggie Club. It's the second highest calorie sandwich behind something called the Gargantuan. 8 slices of provolone cheese will do that. I used to work at McDonald's. There have been some McDonald's life hacks going around the internet for a few years now. Please don't do any of them because then one or both of the following will happen. 1, your order will take forever. Yes, I get that you want fresh fries, but are you really willing to wait the 4 minutes for that? And if you are, do you promise not to complain about the wait? Or number 2, you'll be upcharged for certain ingredients, like the poor man's Big Mac, a McDouble with mac sauce and shredded lettuce. We upcharge you 30 cents for the mac sauce and 20 to 30 cents for the shredded lettuce. I used to work at Boston Market. They're pretty good. The only thing I can think of is that any chicken that isn't on the bone, sandwich, pot pie, etc., is day-old or more leftover chicken. Anything off of a hidden menu. Most people working don't know how to make it, and you'll probably receive a giant glob of assorted ingredients on a bun. Chick-fil-A. Don't order grilled foods if you're gluten-free. While technically gluten-free, a lot of cross-contamination can occur. Be specific to be safe. Oh, and don't order a standard salad at night. It was probably made that morning. Request something else on it and it'll be fresh. My brother's girlfriend used to work at Wendy's, and a saying there about fries was, "They aren't old until they're sold." Don't order any type of fish. I work in a popular fast food place near the ocean, and to make our fish, we grind up all the remains. Eyes, fins, scales, hearts, lungs, things like that, and just make them into fried patties. Ex-Sonic employee here. Don't order steak or grilled chicken ever. Don't get the new Ultimate Chicken sandwiches. They're insanely overpriced, and the normal crispy chicken sandwiches taste way better anyway. The time to get fresh food is when the place is busy, as they're less likely to give you something that's been in hold for an hour, or their hold will continually be fresh. If there's a sale going on for something like half-priced hot dogs or half-priced burgers, only order a reasonable amount if you want quality. If someone orders 20 burgers in the middle of a rush on half-price burger day, we don't care. We'll throw that together so sloppily you'll barely be able to call it a burger. This doesn't apply to half-price corn dogs, however, as we're able to just make a bunch at a time anyway. Don't get the chili. It comes in a bag, gets warmed up in a metal tub, and then sits for 10 hours until we run out and replace it. It's also just not very good to begin with. Try the seasoned popcorn chicken. The barbecue and garlic parmesan flavors are actually really good. If you're allergic to any kinds of foods, be wary. Onions are in the same dressing station as the rest of the condiments, and cross-contamination is not our problem. The same goes for peanuts with the shakes. If you're getting a milkshake, be aware that there are 3 different kinds, and therefore 3 different prices. There's the normal shakes, the master shakes, and the new creamier shakes. The creamier shakes are actually good, just don't get the lavender one. And if you're getting a slushie, the same thing applies, only it's normal slush, candy slush, and real fruit slush. If you're at a stall and the card reader isn't working, just wait for the car hop to come out and give them your card. Don't call in again to ask why the card reader isn't working. And don't hit on the car hops. It's a crappy job and they have to put a smile on whenever they have to deal with you. They're not smiling because they like you, and if they do want to flirt with you for whatever reason, they'll make it very clear. Sonics are dirty as well, at least in the region where I worked. We were continually understaffed and expected to run the entire place with a small crew and clean. We do the best we can, but we don't get paid enough to stay after our shift and work off the clock cleaning up. It sucks, but that's the way it goes. When I used to work there in Canada, McDonald's grilled chicken could sit there for a long time. So can the fillet of fish. Usually they're on top of it, but things happen. Don't be afraid to order those fresh if you're worried it might be stale. Same with regular burger patties. They take like 40 seconds, it's no big deal. I've done a 4-hour shift and just forgot to throw out the old grilled chicken and make new ones because no one ordered it, and it had already went past the timer when I got there, so there was no beeping to remind me. It sounds stupid, and it was. We're all human and humans are dumb though. What you should order is fresh grilled chicken. I used to time the grilled chicken for my breaks because it was just that good. Personally, I think the filet of fish is disgusting at McDonald's, but that's just my opinion. Don't order anything at around the time the menu switches. Everything will be old. And there's an hour where they take the whole system down in the middle of the night. Don't know if everyone does this, but mine did. And you're gonna end up in a long line and pay only cash. I'm a general manager for Taco Bell. Order anything you like at my store. My team and I take pride in giving you quality product. All I ask in return is this. If you want 2 or more Taco 12 packs, please don't order it in the drive-thru. Come inside. I won't deny your 48 Doritos Locos Tacos, but we will all judge you. Drive-thru is meant for quick orders, not to feed your soccer team. Thanks. As someone who's worked fast food for a while, don't go through the drive-thru unless you can't avoid it. If you have all your kids buckled in and it's a hassle, then it's fine, go on through. But if you're just by yourself, try and take the extra minute it takes to get out of your car. You'll usually have your food quicker, even if you're getting it to go, and you have a better chance of not being given the crappy old fries, chicken, or meat patties. For pizza, don't order any pizza that has fresh exotic veggies, unless that joint is not selling only pizza. Exotic veggies include, but aren't limited to, artichokes, silver beet, broccolini, and the likes of unusual tomatoes. At Sonic, if you order only drinks, it'll get delivered faster. Also, combo meals take high priority. During a rush, don't go through the drive-thru. Ice cream takes forever to make. If we give you the wrong item or make a mistake, keep your receipt and we'll give you a free replacement meal. I work at Jimmy John's, and my answer is that everything is always fresh unless you have a terrible manager. And if that happens, corporate shuts you down immediately. Our meats are sliced in the shop and are always refrigerated. And even then, they're sliced the day before most of the time. Same with the veggies and such. The real trick is knowing how to order your sandwich and save money. The Jimmy John's menu is specifically created to squeeze money out of its customers' pockets when you don't know how to order. Subway worker here. A Veggie Delight, Kids Pack, or anything on wheat bread. The Veggie Delight doesn't have anything terribly wrong, it's just the same price as all the other subs. Seems like a waste to me. Even if you're vegetarian, there must be better options out there. For the Kids Pack, that thing is expensive. The 4-inch sandwich for your kid with 1 slice of meat costs the same as the 6-inch I could give you with a drink, with 4 slices of the same meat. The regular brown bread gets dry fast. If it's fresh, all the bread is good. Coming down to the end of the day, run from the sandpaper wheat bread. Ironically though, the bread that seems to stay freshest longest is the honey oat wheat bread. Not sure why. Things I do recommend, change your sandwich to a salad bowl. It's a pain for us to make, so I may regret this, but you get way more bang for your buck. Lastly, never order the roast chicken. It's alright, but I do guarantee there's some specialty chicken going for a cheaper price. And to be honest, all we do is add the various sauces to the roast chicken. So it's basically the same thing, just cheaper and usually with juice. And as an add-on, Subways are really good with food prep and all that. They always keep it fresh, replace things on time, and actually throw out what they shouldn't keep. Others get limited funding and have to make them stretch. A good indicator is the cookies. Every Subway bakes them fresh first thing in the morning. If you walk in and there are some that look slightly older than the others, then that's because they are. Lower your standards if you plan to visit an all-you-can-eat buffet when there aren't many people inside. The food has probably been sitting there for a while since nobody was there to eat it. I can't explain how many times I've gone to a buffet, seen nobody inside, and tasted the stale consequences of my poor judgment calls. I worked at Red Robin for a summer a few years ago. I'm not gonna lie, they were insanely particular about cleanliness, and I actually left that job with more appreciation for Red Robin than when I went in. For example, we had a health inspector come one day. My boss knew about it and didn't tell anyone. When I joked around with him about it later, he laughed and said something like, "Every day's health inspection day. My health inspection." Don't order DQ blizzards with extra sauces. Thanks to the flip it or it's free policy, this means that your now 80% liquid blizzard is almost guaranteed to just slosh out of the cup. At Pizza Hut, everything in the store is frozen when you get to us, so it's all the same quality because it's made as the order comes in. The gluten-free pizza just tastes like absolute garbage for obvious reasons. If you can avoid it, please do. Everything is fresh at Jimmy John's, minus their bread and cookies, sorta. The bread comes frozen and there's quite a process to bake it, but it's all made that day. Anything left over is sold for 50 cents a piece the next day. The cookies are frozen and just thawed, but everything else is fresh. My friend used to work at Wetherspoons, a UK pub chain, and you never want to eat their poached eggs. They come in a plastic cup and they're just popped out and microwaved. Pretty much anything in Wetherspoons is just microwaved crap other than the fish, which she was there some nights breading until 3 a.m. I work at a Domino's and I have some advice. Very rarely do we take notice of no garlic, light or extra buffalo sauce, or well or lightly done. So if you order with any of those things, keep in mind that drivers usually prepare the food and box it out of the oven. Unless specifically told, it's difficult to spot the instructions given by a customer. Personally, I would never eat the brownies, as they're all pre-made and despite being sinfully delicious, are not worth it. The wings are delicious, but usually fall under the same buffalo sauce dilemma. I recommend ordering mild wings instead of hot, as the only difference is the volume of sauce. Premium chicken is a scam. The garlic cups are not the same as what goes on the crust, which is delicious. I would drink a whole bottle if I were ready to die. And gluten-free pizzas are cut with the same pizza cutter unless specified otherwise. Never order more than 2 toppings on a thin crust. The cutter will spread the cheese and whoever prepares it will likely not bother to fix it. Never buy specialty pizzas. Make them yourself in the creator. And lastly, if you saw how the Parmesan bread bites were prepared, I don't think you'd want to eat them anymore. That being said, I make about 15 of them a day and I still eat them. For my Canadian brethren out there, ex-Tim Hortons baker here. I worked the midnight shift at a location that had a high employee turnover rate. Rightly so, as it was always understaffed and underpaid. Here's some tips. Coffee is supposed to be made fresh every 15 minutes. There should be a white marking on the pot indicating when it was last brewed. Look for the marking and make sure it's fresh. Coffee flavor deteriorates really quickly, and we don't mind making you a fresh pot, especially if we messed up and forgot to throw out an old batch. Decaf is hardly ordered in the mornings, so it's likely we'll have to brew a fresh pot or you're getting old product. If you want to order food, do it before midnight, as this is when we throw away the old donuts, buns, and bagels. They're usually sold to farmers who use them in their animal feed. Fresh donuts are usually available at 2 to 3 a.m., maybe earlier if the location is somewhere popular and not understaffed. Maybe later if the people in front are lazy liars who don't want to make food. The general consensus for drive-thru orders is don't order anything more than 4 coffees at most or 2 meals. The people on drive-thru are strictly timed and they get in trouble if they take too long. If you're ordering as a large group, please go inside. Don't make huge orders after 9 p.m. This is the time when the store is most understaffed, and all that's left is usually 1 or 2 people in front and 1 baker. If you see the baker up front or in drive-thru clad all in white, odds are the people in the front are really behind and called them off his or her routine. Forgive us if we get your order wrong and you need to repeat it once or twice. If we take a long time making your order, more than 5 minutes, we usually offer you a free cookie, but don't count on it. Ex-Olive Garden employee here. Everything is horrible for you. Ask a manager to see a nutrition menu and your jaw will drop. The butter that goes on breadsticks comes in the same jugs that motor oil comes in. Liquid form. Basically liquid cholesterol. I know you think you're healthy eating the salad and soup and bread with extra cheese, but you're not. The amount of salt in every soup is unreal, and the salad dressing even has cheese in it. Stay away from anything cream-based, Alfredo sauce, carbonara sauce, etc. Unless you enjoy gut-wrenching poops. Corporate will comp literally anything. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people walk out with twice as much stuff as anticipated, all for nothing. Not a worker, but I ordered a chicken sauce in KFC that wasn't anywhere on the menu, just on the internet. I got a cup with a little of some brown thing that looked, smelled, and tasted like the leftover from deep frying. Do you like flavored lattes? Don't order the Valencia syrup. I used it twice in a year. The bottle was dusty as heck. I don't know the shelf life of latte syrup, but it was old and dusty when I got there. I used to work at Raising Cane's. They only sell a couple things, chicken and fries, so that's always fresh. They were also super clean. I would not order anything with egg whites at IHOP though. A few years back, I went to IHOP with my then girlfriend. She saw on the menu that substituting egg whites for eggs in the omelets and stuff was an option, healthier and lower calories. Now, you have to realize when most people go to IHOP, they're not looking to be healthy. They're looking to set world record calorie and cholesterol levels. So egg whites are probably not ordered often. But my girlfriend was watching what she ate, and she's also the type to always heavily modify the menu. She almost never ordered straight off the menu. So she requests an omelet made with egg whites. The waitress seemed totally confused. In all honesty, I don't think she'd ever heard someone order that before, and she may not have even realized it was an option. She said she would check with the kitchen. She came back a couple minutes later and said the kitchen crew were looking for some egg whites. Then, about 10 minutes after that, she came back and said, "They found some egg whites, but they're gonna take a while to thaw out. Do you still want them?" Most people here would say no. Not my then girlfriend. She was like, "Great, thanks." Well, suffice to say, my girlfriend ended up with the worst food poisoning I've ever seen. She was vomiting every 45 minutes for almost 2 days straight. She had to be put on an IV and prescribed this special skin gel that stopped vomiting. It was insane. In all seriousness, for a brief moment, I honestly think she considered that she might die. So the moral of the story is to not order anything at a restaurant that looks like someone never orders it. Jamba Juice here. When I worked there, 2 small 16-size cups equal 1 large power size. People would often come in and ask for their kids to get 2 small smoothies. If it's the same flavor, ask for a power size in 2 cups. Saves you more than $1. Whataburger in Texas and Southwest US area. Order everything. Haven't worked there in a decade, but unless quality has gone to the dumps, it's all worth ordering. Fast food for sure, but the kitchen should be spotless every night when it closes. You'll get diabetes, but not food sickness. Don't order the salads from Burger King. 99% of the time, the lettuce isn't washed. We also just started serving hot dogs not too long ago. They're put in the broiler just long enough to have grill marks, then we toss them in the microwave. So avoid that. Back in the day, I worked for a concessionaire at a major sports arena. NBA, concerts, things like that. The standard rule was never order a hot dog from the concession stand until after the first quarter of the game or after the main act is playing. Why? Well, at the same time, we specialized in a nasty trick called reruns. Reruns were the unsold hot dogs from the night before. When closing up the stand, we were ordered to unwrap the unsold hot dogs, peel the meat from the bun, then take the dogs back to the sink and wash the stuck bread parts off. Now, crunchy buns went in a bag, the now rinsed hot dogs went in another bag. The next day, or week if the team was going on a road trip, the same hot dogs would be brought back out, reheated, and restuffed into those same buns. Those were the ones that were served first. I don't know if this is still happening, but at the time I worked there, reruns were a way of life. Those who worked in the stands hated the practice, but management insisted. We also reran popcorn, pretzels, and ice. Retail workers of Reddit, what's your Black Friday horror story? We had a lady call the police on our store because we sold out of a TV. I really wish I was lying. They came too. I worked at a store that had a service department. They couldn't bring anything up at the service counter, but they had a computer which made it look like a register. A guy was standing there patiently waiting to be rung up. Finally, somebody notices him and asks what he needs. "I'd like to pay," he says. "I'm sorry, this isn't a register," replies the service tech. The guy then proceeds to try and convince the service tech to let him pay because the line for the main registers is 3 hours long. Of course, the service tech couldn't because he didn't have a register. He just had a computer for making appointments and such. So after 15 minutes of argument, the guy moves off to find the line. Here's the fun part. While he was arguing, somebody else saw him standing by something that looked like a register, so got in line behind him. Then, people saw the shorter line and got in behind them. With nobody to control it, the line to nowhere grew quickly. 15 minutes was all it took for the not line to snake all the way around the department. So when the doofus who started this whole fiasco went to find the right line, he found the end of the line that he had started. Then the guy behind him heard that there wasn't a register, so he followed the first guy. Then the next customer followed the second, and so on. They walked around in a circle for an hour before somebody noticed them. We almost had a riot when a manager had to tell 100 people that they weren't in line and had just waited an hour for nothing. That same year, we had several scuffles at points where the register line had forked into 2 lines. From then on, we marked off a huge register path and had several employees just manage the line. I worked at Walmart years ago. One of my managers thought she was being sneaky and swapped my Black Friday off shift with an on at 9 a.m. Normally, my shifts didn't start until 1 and ended at 9. So this was utter bull. I was in the bakery department and had to work all of Thanksgiving the day before, and they ended up needing more help. I came in at 6 a.m. that day and worked a 14-hour shift because most of my team had been given the holiday off. My manager's excuse being, "You're young, they have families they need to be with and kids to celebrate with." So I was pretty angry. I found out that the Black Friday sale was a 65-inch LCD TV and electronics and PS3s. So needless to say, it was going to be a bloodbath. I stayed in my department because there was literally no one else there and caught up on much needed sanitation. When the manager found out before the sale started, she came my way to rain down fire, brimstone, and bull on me. Thankfully, I could use their own stupid policies against them. There needs to be at least one member of the bakery crew on hand to write on cakes, and since I was the only one there, they were out of luck. I avoided all of the Black Friday chaos, got an easy day of work, and the perfect spot to watch all of it unfold, all while screwing over a manager I hated. It was a beautiful day. I work at the largest lingerie retailer in the country. We had a security guard set up for the beginning of Black Friday. A Southern belle mother decided she didn't want to wait in a 50-person deep line and that she would try and cut. Our security guard asked her multiple times to step to the back of the line or leave. She proceeds to ream him with every curse word in the book and ended by threatening him with a gun she had in her bag. This will be my last holiday in retail. My horror story is the customer who took a poop in one of my fitting rooms and then wiped with a $125 polo from Ralph Lauren. Nothing more needs to be said. I worked for a golf superstore as a cashier. Black Friday customers come rushing in and the line starts. I proceed to scan the first item and nothing. The registers are completely down and the lines are growing fast. The only thing we could do is take every transaction manually, write down SKUs, calculate tax, and use the old credit card swipers for 3 hours. I never worked retail during Black Friday again. The store is absolutely packed and a larger trailer trash looking woman gets up to the register with 4 coffee machines, about 30 different pieces of clothing, clearly none of which would fit her, and a set of pots and pans and a blender. I'm at the register serving a line of, at this point, probably 20 people. She gets to my register and I ring everything up. Total comes out to about $200, because most of the stuff she's getting is cheap that we sell even cheaper on Black Friday. Of course, as soon as I tell her the total, I'm wrong. So is the register apparently.
You double scanned most of it. It should be half that price.
No, I didn't, lady. Learn to count. I wish I could say that to her, but my manager is literally right behind me on the other register and would chew me out like no tomorrow. So in my nicest tone of voice, I reply, "I don't believe I did. You can even see it right here on the register. If you really want me to, I can start over to make sure nothing's scanned more than once though." Of course, she ignores the whole thing and just tries to pay. She's clearly not been to the store before, because our old register system requires us to take your card and swipe it ourselves. She spends a few seconds looking around for where she can scan her card, and I chime in, "We have to scan it up here, ma'am. System is too old for us to have something where you scan the card. I'm so sorry about that." She's already angry enough and trying to fight with me about scanning it herself. Finally, after spitting in my face for a few seconds while I'm forced to smile like the brain-dead monkey corporate thinks I am, she hands me the stupid card. I check the name because legally we have to, and we have to see ID as well. Well, I see the card and immediately expect chaos, because the first name on it is David. She hands me her ID, and lo and behold, her name ain't David. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't legally charge this card. Unless David is with you, in which case I'd need to see his ID.
Are you kidding me? This is my son's card. He's letting me use it. He's at home with my husband.
Oh, lovely. As if this wasn't bad enough already. "I'm sorry, I can't swipe this card unless it's yours. Do you have a different card on you with your name on it?" After grumbling for a bit, she finally hands over a different card. Go through the normal motions, and the card is declined. Great. How can this get any worse? "Your card was declined, ma'am." Cue me getting screamed at in front of an ever-growing impatient live audience.
Let me talk to your manager.
At this point, I can only pray that hell itself will swallow this demon up, or at least end me so I don't have to deal with it. My manager turns around from her register and says, "Just a moment, ma'am, I'm just finishing up this transaction, then I'll be right with you." Of course, this little old lady ain't got the time for that. At this point, I'm pretty sure my line at the register should be paying me for the entertainment they'll get out of this lady unloading all of her crazy on me. My manager finally turns around and has me switch to her register for the time being while she handles the crazy. I manage to get a few people through the register while I hear screaming coming from both sides, as my manager isn't great with being yelled at. I get a few comments and looks from customers basically saying, "I'm so sorry, we're not all terrible, I promise." Finally, I hear the woman over there yell that she'll put all of her stuff back and go shop somewhere else. Thank God. Turns out that's not what she did. Instead, she ended up going to the exit on the other side of our department and trying to walk out with everything in the cart. My manager sees this and calls loss prevention, and so does the cashier on the register down there. Loss prevention sends some of their guys over to her and they try and stop her after calling the police. Now, I didn't get to leave the register because we were packed, but I was told she tried to fight a few of the people from loss prevention before the cops got there. Ended up with her getting arrested. The rest of my day sucked anyway, but that made it a bit better. When I worked at Best Buy, I watched two elderly ladies get into a fist fight over a Nintendo DS. That and cleaning the aftermath of Black Friday looked like a grocery store before a hurricane. When I was 15, I got my first actual job. It was at a clothing store and my first day was Black Friday. I thought it wouldn't be a big deal because I was hired for men's formal wear. When I show up at 4 a.m., my manager tells me I'm working women's shoes today only. Absolute madness. The worst part is shoe salesmen get commission, but since I didn't have employee numbers, I got only minimum wage, losing out on hundreds of dollars of extra pay. Pretty sure they did that on purpose. I worked at Walmart during Black Friday about 12 to 13 years ago. The hot items that year were $10 DVD players and trampolines. The DVD players were stacked on two tables near the registers and the trampolines were in sporting goods. I'm walking to the receiving area in the back and someone from Sporting Goods asks if I can grab a U-boat or L-cart to load up the last trampoline. I had to go all the way to grocery to get one, and as I'm coming back, someone asks about an item. So I walk 2 feet away from my cart and some woman grabs it and runs towards Sporting Goods. I get there and the woman and husband are loading up the trampoline and it wasn't even for them. The other lady that had it and purchased it, had the receipt and all, just needed to carry out, said, "Hey, that's mine." And the husband got in her face and said,
"What are you gonna do about it?"
They started to walk off and I was shocked at that point. And the husband looked at me and said,
"What's your problem?"
I just smiled and told the sporting goods guy to call management. The husband then said,
"Run, honey!"
And they booked it to the front. They made it out of the store with the trampoline too. Then I get to the front near the $10 DVD players. One older woman grabs the last one left on one of the two tables. Another lady grabs the same one. They scuffle. One lady decks the other one into the other table full of $10 DVD players. They all fall over and she runs, never dealing with that again. When I was in school, I worked at Walmart for the holidays. They had a fun agreement where if you worked Thanksgiving 6 p.m. until Black Friday morning 6 a.m., you didn't have to come in Black Friday. Fun, right? So after Thanksgiving lunch with my boyfriend's family at 4 p.m., I headed to work where I put on an oversized yellow smock with a blue sun on it. I was put in charge of 70-inch plasma screen television vouchers. I was given 7 vouchers to distribute at 8 p.m. so customers could go to the register, pay for the television, and have it loaded into their car around back. So problems arose very quickly. A line for the 70-inch TV began as I started my shift at 6 p.m. As soon as 7 people formed a line, I had to turn people away. At 8 p.m., the vouchers were distributed. Customers 1 and 2 were husband and wife. They were an older couple who brought camping chairs to wait for their 2 vouchers. Here's where the mess started. Customer 8 approaches me for a voucher. I tell him that they've all been distributed and he was free to come back within the hour to see if anyone surrendered their voucher. He then becomes visually distressed and angry, to which there was nothing I could do. In comes customer 1 from before, the older man from the couple. He offers to sell his voucher to customer 8 for what was close to the price of the on-sale television that had not been purchased. Customer 8 agrees reluctantly and pulls out the money in exchange for the television voucher. The older couple then walks off with not only Mrs. Customer 2's television voucher, but also the newly acquired cash to buy said television at the register. In comes Customer 9, who addresses me very angrily with, "Hey you, aren't you gonna do something about that?" while gesturing wildly at the older couple who totally scored and the poor guy who essentially paid double for a Black Friday television. I had to let that customer know that what the others did with the vouchers was their business. This guy got way too close to me and one of my coworkers noticed and came to help. The guy then takes off in a huff and claims Walmart cheated him. 2 months later, I quit to work in my licensed field and never looked back. Years later, still no regrets. I don't even like going into the store I worked at. Not retail, but I worked at a restaurant that is right across the street from the mall and open on Black Friday. So naturally, after people get great deals on whatever, they come to eat. Anyways, I'm sitting in back of the house Black Friday morning waiting for my inevitably long shift to start. It was incredibly busy as it was, but I wasn't about to clock in early. I was messing around with one of the managers when I heard a hostess scream through the walkie, "Help! Help!" So I immediately rushed to the entrance to see 2 grown men on the ground fighting, one in nothing but his underwear, and my shift lead trying to pull them off each other while screaming, "Stop! This is a family restaurant! There are children here!" I jolted forward in an attempt to break up the fight. This is where it gets weird. Everyone is gathered around this small area watching or trying to help, when someone grabbed a fire extinguisher and started spraying us with it. So we have a bunch of people trying to break up a fight between a man in his underwear and some other dude, and someone spraying us with a fire extinguisher while we have Christmas carols playing in the background. Finally, we get the fight broken up, cops show up, the whole 9 yards. Guy number 1 got the last TV voucher from Best Buy, and guy number 2 was very angry about that. So he followed him over to the restaurant to try and buy the TV from him. Guy 1 told guy 2 to screw off, so guy 2 took off his pants and started to fight guy 1. My Black Friday 2 years ago was just the opposite of crazy. I used to work in a grocery store, so it was absolutely dead the whole shift. I've never been so utterly and thoroughly bored before or since. I would have killed for some crazy things to happen, just so I could have a chuckle about it the next day. I work at a kids store where almost everything was half off for Black Friday. But the thing is, I normally help moms and grandparents at the register, so I don't see Best Buy style murder over televisions. I get old ladies yelling at my coworkers over the price of smiley face pillows and women bringing in hundreds of dollars worth of clothing and kitty makeup they bought weeks before at full price, just to buy it all back right away at sale price after the return's over. I also had a grandpa shout at me because I told him we were out of bathrobes. Good times. For me, I was working my first job, second week in, and I'm working the floor at a Best Buy on Black Friday. I wasn't great at my job yet, so they had me running people from the line they had set up to different registers and quickly answering questions from customers. No big deal. At about 1 a.m., as I'm running customers back and forth, we hear a commotion on the other side of the store, and a few police officers come in. Turns out, some guy had broken a bit of plastic off of one of the information plaques and tried to use the pointy bit to stab an employee in the neck. I never found out why he did it. Some people are just crazy. I'm so incredibly thankful not to be working retail anymore. When I was working at Walmart, me and another coworker had a lady come in during our Black Thursday sale with her children. She was going around shopping with her kids for a while, but then saw me and my coworker in the bedding department and left her children with us, asking for us to watch them while she went to get some products. Before we were able to tell her no, she disappears and doesn't come back for her kids for 20 minutes. Both of us are just standing there watching her kids slowly freak out and cry for their mother, wondering if she's gonna come back. My supervisor then walks by and sees what's going on, and we filter in. She was quite annoyed with the mother, who by this point has yet to make an appearance. When mom finally showed, her children rushed to her, and my supervisor had a chat with her. Unfortunately, I didn't catch what my supervisor said to her. I worked as a cashier at Target 2 years ago on Black Friday. My particular store opened at 7 on Thanksgiving, and I had to be there from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I don't know how other stores do it, but for mine, we had vouchers for the big ticket items like the new iPads and huge HD TVs and so on. So there usually wasn't a stampede of people, and the lines to the registers were set up very efficiently, doing all the preparation we can to avoid making it complete chaos. I began to feel hopeful that it would be an okay night, well worth the holiday pay. As the doors were unlocked, I could not have been more wrong. At around midnight, 2 large women come to my register with 4 carts piled with random crap they had coupons for. Just imagine 40 bottles of shampoo, 50 sticks of deodorant, 25 2-liters of soda, etc. All just piled in there. I take a deep breath and begin scanning items. And as I tell them the total, somewhere around $800, one of them pulls out a wad of slightly damp coupons from her bra. Stifling the urge to vomit, I accept them and proceed to scan/attempt to scan roughly 200 coupons. After doing about 20 of them with only 3 or 4 working, I decide to look at the coupons and sort them into expired and non-expired, as well as coupons from other stores that we didn't take. We would take manufacturer's coupons and Target coupons, but we wouldn't take a Bed Bath & Beyond coupon. About 20 minutes later, some coupons were hard to make out because of the dampness, and the ladies insisting I sort through them all, I finalized the tally and proceeded to scan the maybe 30 coupons that were valid or acceptable. The ladies realize that the pile is significantly shorter than it should have been and start complaining to me about the lack of coupons. I explain the situation and continue scanning and then putting them away in the register. The lovely part came when the ladies realized their total was only reduced to around $700. Screaming that I was trying to scam them, the lady demanded I scan all the coupons. I politely explained that I could not scan the majority due to them being expired or unusable at our store. She then asked what discounts I could give her, and when I said that I couldn't give her any besides the normal 5% if she paid with a red card, she began pulling at the neckline of her shirt, asking if there was anything she could do to get a discount. Let me stop here and say that I am partial to the thicker female form, but I'm not particularly attracted to someone who looked like a pregnant Michelin man. So I again politely refused and said if they had any more valid coupons, I would be happy to scan them. Otherwise, their total was X. Now the fun part. The 2 land whales decide their rights have been infringed upon and begin screaming profanities, prompting the team lead and 2 AP officers to come to my register rather quickly. Upon seeing people who looked in charge, the ladies began telling them how I failed to do my job and things like that. After I told my boss what I did, she agreed with me and said that I was following the store's policy. The ladies then tipped over all 4 carts full of their crap, spilling it all over the aisle, threw change at me and my team lead, and proceeded to waddle out of the store. I quit right then and there, and now I'm loving my job at a bakery. About 6 years ago, I was working at a mall bookstore's cafe. I had the opening shift, which, thankfully, because it was in a mall, was 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Unfortunately, the late shift person called in sick, so I had 2 hours off before a 4 p.m. to close shift. While that sucks, it wasn't the worst part of my day. I actually had a customer who was stalking me and spent the entire day sitting in the cafe reading a book and occasionally coming up to order something new. Anytime I wasn't behind the counter or in the back room, he followed me around, including during my 2-hour shift gap. I didn't dare go to my car on my break because I didn't want him knowing what it looked like, and my manager didn't want to call security on him if he didn't actually approach me. Worst Black Friday ever. Luckily, 2 weeks later, he did approach me while I was working and asked if he could clip my fingernails as a keepsake. That was enough to get him banned from not only the store, but also the mall. My manager also made sure someone walked me to my car for the next few months, so it was all good. Last year, my store had some seasonal cashiers start on Thanksgiving Black Friday, and within the first hour of his first shift, some idiot tried to steal cash out of his drawer and stuff it in his apron. Our AP guy simply walked out of his office and escorted him off the floor until the police arrived without the customers noticing. Parents of Reddit, what is your kid doing or wearing that you hope is just a phase? My 7-year-old saw a ceiling fan installation video on YouTube, and he's now obsessed with ceiling fans. He's gonna ask Santa Claus for 4 new ceiling fans for Christmas. My teenage son is going through the I don't have to shower every day even after rugby practice phase. I've tried to tell him he stinks, but for some reason he thinks I'm crazy. I hope this ends soon. My teenage daughter claims that our family is a communist dictatorship and she has no rights. I sighed and told her it's more like a fascist dictatorship or maybe even a monarchy. He won't shave his beard. He's 17 and it's very thin and long. Reminds me of the first time I saw my own armpit hair when I was in middle school. I'm getting married next week and I asked him to shave. And he said,
"But Mom, it'll take me like 2 years to grow it back."
So we compromised that he would at least trim it shorter. Lying, but in a really incompetent way. She's nearly 3 and has started trying to get out of doing stuff by making the most outrageous and clearly untrue statements. Like, you can't brush my hair, I haven't got a head. And I can't put my shoes on, I'm a box and boxes don't have feet. And things like that. I try not to just laugh in her face, but it's difficult. My 12-year-old is obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's. It wouldn't be so bad if every electronic device he got his hands on didn't get a profile or something named after some weird animatronic character. He made 4 new separate user accounts on the netbook that we let him use to play Minecraft, named them all after FNAF characters. My son is 13. He recently started insisting on tucking his pants, usually sweatpants, into his socks, and pulling his socks up and then wearing sandals. I told him he looks like a pirate with 2 wooden legs. He's a tall, thin stick of a boy. So far, no one else has mentioned it to him, so he thinks I'm just being silly. So my 4-year-old is obsessed with Minecraft. I enjoy it quite a lot also, but I'm really only playing it because he wants to watch. But he keeps wanting me to do creepy things. Like the latest thing he wants me to do is to build tracks and collect all of the villagers into a place and build a machine to kill them. I know they aren't real people or anything, but no, I'm not going to build concentration camps. My son is wearing pull-ups, and if the smell is any indication, he's currently crapping his pants while grunting and telling me right to my face that he doesn't have to go poop. This is getting really old. I have a 14-year-old who is obsessed with socks. He spent like $19 on a single pair of socks. They have to be these Nike Elite gold-plated something something. I hope he grows out of this fast. Crying. Just crying and screaming for hours and hours and hours to the point where I consider taking him to be seen by a doctor. Then, just as I'm about to arrange it, he stops. Then does it again. He's only 5 days old, but I'm already feeling the pressure and stress. So my 12-year-old son keeps saying that he's a bean boy. At first, I thought it was just a stupid game, but I checked his internet history and it is 85% bean related. I really hope it's just a phase. My 10 and 13-year-old are all hot topic, all the time. As a legit punk kid back in the 80s, this seems wrong to me. My tights were shredded because I was too poor to get new ones. It was just a bonus that they look cool. Hot Topic has some cool things, but I feel like it should be utilized to enhance a look, not to just be a head-to-toe walking marketing ad for their stuff. My 5-year-old is hitting that kindergarten phase where he's stretching his wings, experimenting with independence, and seeing exactly how far he can push his parents before something really bad happens. He'll sneer or glare at you when you tell him not to do something bad. But once you get in his face and tell him in no uncertain terms exactly what'll happen to him if he keeps it up, he starts crying. Can't have it both ways, bud. If you're old enough to run out into the street by yourself and laugh the first time I yell at you about it, you're too old to get out of a punishment by crying like a baby. His sister went through this phase too, and she got over it. Now she's the sweetest, most empathetic, most respectful little thing you could ever dream of raising. I'm sure he'll get there too. My 5-year-old is obsessed with Bowser from Mario Brothers. He talks about him all the time. It's getting old, and I wonder what the other kids in his kindergarten class think. Or maybe they obsess about similar things too. My 3-year-old has just discovered his personal bits and can not only pee in the potty, but if properly angled, can form a fine arc of urine that will land on anything he aims it at, which at the moment tends to be the cat. Yes, my toddler is peeing on the cat, which then runs all over the place, getting it everywhere. Thank you, toddler. Your girlfriends of the future will be hearing all about this. Not my parents, but my brothers hope that listening to rock music is just a phase. I'm a 20-year-old black man. God, please help me. My son has a fedora. Knee-high, neon-colored Nike socks. With shorts, naturally. Elementary school fashion can be mind-boggling. Growling loudly at everything. He's 2.5. Just flew to Orlando from the UK. Funny for the first hour, not so much for the next 8 or so. Minecraft and KSP. Granted, I play a lot of KSP, but I had to buy his own laptop and get it for him because he was messing up daddy's missions. My son has lately become obsessed with designer clothes that I can't afford at all. He's been pestering for a hoodie from some Born by Wolves or something like that, and I can't fathom how any sane person would pay $175 for a hoodie. I hope he grows out of it and starts saving the money I give him instead of spending it irresponsibly like he's doing now. Pull-ups at night. He's gonna be 7, and although most mornings that pull-up is relatively dry, I'm looking forward to never buying another diaper or pull-up again. My 5-year-old is 100% bathroom independent. He just forgets to wipe half the time. He also has a bad habit of waiting until the last possible minute he can hold his pee. This means he either A, unleashes the beast and lets fly, or B, has trouble with his belt and wets himself. Sure, it's sort of fun predicting when the cross-house potty sprint is going to occur, but it cannot be healthy. Pooping in the shower and towing it down the drain. He gets it on the curtains and everything. No idea how he does it. My 12-year-old has been obsessed with yo-yos for a while now. I was afraid he was going to get picked on at school because of it. Turns out he's gotten a bunch of other kids interested in them, enough that they're starting a yo-yo club to teach each other yo-yo tricks. One of their APs is going to help with that part, and the engineering teacher is going to help them design and make yo-yos on the new 3D printers. My son is almost 2 and he loves Dark Souls. Everything about it. He watches speedruns, walkthroughs all day. I've tried to get him to watch little kid programming and he won't. He watches for a whole 2 minutes and then brings me the Xbox controller and says, "Ma, Dark Souls." He has swords and shields and he enjoys sword fighting now. If you pretend to stab him with a sword, he'll fall down, then get up and pretend to crush a life gem. The sound effect included. Praise the sun, I guess. I got the perfect one, but it was me. It was a blue blazer that I had painted with flames on the lapel and a skull on the back. Cool idea, horrible execution. And the jacket was so ratty. Frozen. She has this one dress that she wears, it gets washed, she wears it again, lather, rinse, repeat. We watch that stupid movie almost every day. She's onto her second copy. She has a cape that goes over her regular clothes on the day her dress is being washed. I can repeat the entire script. I'm over Frozen. Not a parent, but my nephew pretty much lives with us, so close enough. He's 5 and is right in the midst of his picky eating stage. It's so annoying because we'll be eating one thing and he'll insist on eating something else. And he's hardcore, so he'll literally starve himself rather than eat what we're eating. So we usually have to give in. But sometimes we're eating a food he likes, but because he doesn't want that food that day, he'll try to claim he doesn't like it.
I don't like pizza though. We ate pizza yesterday. Yeah, but I was just pretending because I don't like pizza. I like pasta.
He's a great kid, polite and kind. But sometimes I want to drop kick him a few miles because he's getting on my nerves. Not a parent, but my 14-year-old brother wore shorts to school the last 2 days with temperatures between 0 to minus 10 degrees Celsius. My 3-year-old likes to pull his bits out of his pull-up and yell,
"Look at my dingle!"
I really hope this stops before I send him to daycare. My son is a brony. I just have to keep reminding myself that he's not drinking or doing drugs. Then again, teenagers have been drinking and doing drugs for centuries, and mostly turn out okay. Aspiring to be a magical horse from a show intended for kids half their age? Not sure how that'll turn out. My 7-year-old daughter will be fully dressed inside as though it's snowing and cold. She also refuses to wear matching gloves or socks. Please keep in mind that it's 76 degrees in my house. I guess it's more his attitude, but he's really materialistic and status conscious. At least as much as a 6-year-old can be. He's always comparing his stuff to other people's stuff. I don't really understand where he gets it from, because I'm not like that at all. On the one hand, it's cool if he's willing to work for the nice things he wants. On the other hand, it's not cool if he's just so obsessed that it's taking over parts of his brain, you know? He only wants to play sports that have the most gear, because he likes the gear, not necessarily the sport. And he has to have the nicest shoes. If his friends have some cool thing, he must also have that cool thing. He's the one who leaves the toy store saying, "That's really cool you got me these things, but why didn't you get me this too?" Yes, I've tried putting everything back and leaving the toy store. This just seems to be the way he is right now. He also thinks he's an expert after spending 2 minutes learning about something. That is really infuriating. No, you're not an expert on sharks because we read half of a kid's book on sharks. He also likes to be the best. No, you're not good enough to be in the NHL. You're 6. Okay, yeah, you're a good skater now, but guess what? If you just sit there congratulating yourself instead of practicing, all those other guys on your little league team will blow right by you next year. I mean, I don't say this to him, I just tell him to keep practicing. I don't know what to do anymore. My 9-year-old son really likes sleeveless shirts. My grandma bought him a bunch, and he chooses his daily outfit, which is always a sleeveless shirts with shorts every day. All of the shorts he owns are plaid. It's like he's all preppy on the bottom and hillbilly on the top. I don't care too much because who really gives a crap what their kids wear as long as 1, it's appropriate for the event, and 2, is clean. It's embarrassing to go out in public with him, but screw it, he's happy. I'm 24 and childless, but I really hope my rabbit stops pooping on my sofa soon. Not a parent, but my little brother has been playing a lot of computer games, and instead of using the normal hand configuration, ring finger on A, middle on W and S, and index on D, like a normal person, he uses his index for all 4 keys. It drives me crazy. My 9-year-old daughter dresses in as much black as she can get her hands on, and is flattered when people compare her to Wednesday Addams. She's also very into some YouTube channels that I really don't get, like Miranda Sings, and endless videos of people putting together outfits for different occasions. Which wouldn't be that weird if she didn't try to insist on spending 80% of her life in the same shapeless black schmat. My 6-year-old thinks he's Bruce Lee. And my 9-year-old thinks he's Paul Phoenix. Roughhousing is good, but honestly, they tag team me while I'm asleep. All I hear is, "What-a?" and I'm out cold again. Not a parent, but as a kid, I used to have a Hercules phase after binge watching the Disney movie. Used to take one arm out of my shirt like a toga and walk around with a sword, insisting to be called Hercules. I do miss my toga. Obnoxious YouTube videos. My Little Pony, Shopkins, Minecraft. I don't know how these people get so popular because their voices are downright painful. I truly wonder if Cookie Swirl C keeps friends with her fakey little girl voice. She has to be in her early 20s. I want an interview where she's asked, "What do people say when they find out your YouTube is all about you playing with kids' toys?" My daughter is obsessed with death. She's 9 and will ask hypothetical questions such as, "If this ferry sank, how many people would die?" Or, "Are there sharks in these waters? How many people have been eaten?" She seems to have toned it down a little bit in the last few months at least. I am so sick of Caillou and Daniel Tiger, these whiny little brats. But she's 5, and it's nice that she's not watching gender-driven drivel or wants to watch stuff with material that's too mature for her. My 7-year-old keeps making giant monoliths in Minecraft for Lego characters. His village worships a 400-foot Emmet. House full of 15-year-old girls, and they all call each other, and me sometimes, bruh. It's like they aren't even trying to finish a whole word. They gave up in the middle of it. Crocs. My 8-year-old has a hand-me-down pair. 4-year-old was dying for a pair like her big sis. Then 2-year-old wanted some too. Next thing I know, my husband will want a pair. And divorce is just too expensive. Hoping the Crocs phase goes away soon. She likes to drop her pants, shake her butt at me, and sing, "Botswana, Botswana!" She's nearly 6. At least she only does it at home. My daughter likes to sleep during the day when I'm awake, and then fuss and not want to go to sleep at night when mom is tired. She's a month old, but I can't wait until we get her schedule all figured out. My 2-year-old marches around the house with T-Rex arms and growls at us. She'll also chase us around the house while planning to be a dinosaur. Scares the crap out of other kids who come over to visit. Now that I think about it, she learned it from me, so might not be growing out of this one. My 13-year-old daughter judges everyone who is the least bit different from her, and is incredibly annoyed by almost everyone and everything. I'm really hoping she'll quickly learn to just stop caring. My teenage daughter is dating a girl, which I completely support. I'm just surprised. I just wish she would change because I have no clue how to deal with it. Do I treat her girlfriend like I would a boyfriend? Not allowed in my daughter's room, not allowed out late, etc.? Or do I let her run wild like I do when she's out with her other female friends? It seems wrong to treat her differently than the other girls, but at the same time, I don't want my daughter doing things she's too young for. This would be so much easier if it were a phase, or if she were already an adult. I could just be like, hey, that's awesome, and move on. Instead of getting up and going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, my 4-year-old pops a squat right beside her bed and pees all over the floor. I make her clean it up every time, yet she still does it. Roblox on my gaming PC. He's 11 and always goes back to Roblox. I don't get it. I have a huge Steam library, but I can't get him to play anything else. When my daughter gets upset, annoyed, overwhelmed, or overtired, she turns her head to the right and spits on the floor, like a continuous 6-inch long saliva snail. My kid is about to be 3, and for the last 4 months or more, he's been using the toilet absolutely fine. Now, all of a sudden, he poops in the garden. He likes the moon to see his bum plums. His words, not mine. I have a 22-month-old boy, and he's obsessed with plucking the hair out of all of his teddies and any toys that have hair, to the point that the seams tear open. He'll then cram as much of it as humanly possible up his nose. I have no idea where he got this from, and it's worrying that it'll get stuck one time. We've binned all furry teddies since, but any chance he gets, he'll try to pluck carpets, rugs, and even blankets. The boy is a nutcase. Anytime anybody farts, my 3-year-old blames me, even when I'm not even in the same building as him. My 2-year-old sucks juice out of his beaker and spits it on the carpet, then tries to suck it back up. It's really gross. I don't know why he does it, and it's really hard to stop him because, dehydration. It's a work in progress. Not my child, but my 11-year-old sister is obsessed with Halo. She's never played it, but loves everything about it. She knows more about it than me. Apparently, Master Chief's name is John. Who knew? If she finds some sort of Halo-related item in his store, she'll buy it and document the opening process by recording it. If she doesn't have the money to buy it, she'll document the find by, of course, recording it. It's not that bad. I find it cute. She also draws a really good Master Chief. She has around 200 plus drawings somewhere. She doesn't draw him to exact detail, kinda adds her own little flair. Also draws those little pet shop toys as Marines. I don't know, she's weird. My 7-year-old son is obsessed with Michael Jackson, specifically Smooth Criminal. He loves Minecraft and Five Nights at Freddy's too, but the MJ thing is borderline disturbing. He had a Michael Jackson birthday party, records videos of himself dancing in costume to Smooth Criminal, has several movies, CDs, a video game, an action figure, several costumes, and can tell you exactly what vitiligo is. He has all of these things because I choose to enthusiastically endorse pretty much anything he does. And I figure the fastest way for something to lose its sparkle is for the parents to think it's cool. Other than people thinking it's strange, his obsession has only caused public awkwardness once. We were out to dinner and there was another family in the restaurant that included 3 teenage sons with huge, luxurious afros. The parents were interracial and my son was open-mouthed gawking at them. The restaurant was a buffet, so there were several passes back and forth by us. And at one point, he whispers to me, "Mom, they look like the Jackson 5. I love their hair." He genuinely admired them and innocently wanted to look at them. But we live in Southeast Texas, so I'm sure they're used to getting gawked at in public for less pleasant reasons. He's too young to understand about the allegations against Michael, and he just thinks most people think MJ was a little strange and made up not nice stories about him because he was famous. Who's that guy or that girl from your office, and what did they do to earn that title? I'll start. I used to work inside sales at an HVAC company just outside of Toronto. There was a guy there named Stan. Stan was money. Stan tried so hard to be social, but didn't quite know what he was doing, which often led to hilarity. Here are a few examples of Stan being Stan. Upon learning a coworker was Polish, he said, "You're a Polak?" Then told her every anti-Polish joke he knew. He genuinely thought she would find it funny, and he was laughing the whole time. After not getting a promotion after his review, since there were no positions for him to move into, nor was he anywhere near qualified, he created a petition to have our sales manager fired, and went around to everyone in each department and asked them to sign it. Nobody signed it except for him. My personal favorite was at a company barbecue. Stan and one of the guys from shipping decided to do mushrooms. The barbecue was at the president of the company's house, so this was wildly inappropriate. After about 45 minutes, he was going around from person to person shouting, "Go G-Men!" to the guys. He was a New York Giants fan and the season had just started, and asked the girls to dance with him. He then told a racist joke to the 65-year-old VP and laughed so hard at his own joke that he started drooling. I miss that guy sometimes. He made work a lot more interesting. A guy at my work, let's call him Roger, claimed that you can get high-octane racing fuel by mixing 89 octane and 93 octane in your gas tank. Roger told me on my first day here 7 years ago that if I wanted to know any good Asian massage parlors nearby, he'd recommend the good ones with the happy endings. First day at work. He used to watch webcam girls from the Philippines on his desktop at work, stripping, doing other unsavory things, etc. Then he went over and married one, and now she lives here. She's half his age and probably less than half his size. He took a Filipino coworker to see his buddy's band at a local bar. Turns out it was a biker bar, frequented by a lot of some kind of Aryan Nation-style bikers. The coworker told me that there were signs up extolling the virtues of white supremacy, and that everyone was glaring at him the entire time he was in the bar. When he went to point it out, Roger just laughed and said, "I come here all the time, it's no big deal." Roger snores through meetings. Roger at one time had some kind of narcolepsy or something, and would fall asleep in his cube. Coworkers frequently threw things at him to wake him up. The weird thing is, he's actually a pretty nice guy. If you got arrested or something and called him at 3 a.m. to come bail you out, he'd do it, even if he'd only met you once for like 10 minutes. He's very friendly and sociable. He's just really strange. I used to work with Brian, about 230 pounds of pure software geek. He had a full beard like Grizzly Adams. Baths and showers were not on his list of important things to do. Once, we flew him to the client site to help solve a pesky problem. I reminded him to dress for the occasion. I greeted him at the front lobby and was shocked to see him with a collared shirt that had never been ironed and his tie tied directly to his neck. Not under the collar, just wrapped around his neck. When I mentioned it to him, he said, "If that's my only problem, then we're in good shape." A direct quote from my colleague. I woke up on an old mattress next to my boyfriend's brother in an abandoned church wearing a bikini in Tuscaloosa. And that was the first time I'd ever done Xanax. She also brought a pink briefcase full of adult toys to work at a law firm because she had an adult toy party to host later in the evening. She lived in a house that didn't have a kitchen. She has 2 pet squirrels and her husband plays in an awful nu metal band. She also crushes up pills on her desk with her keys and snorts them when she thinks no one's looking. We have a one-upper at work who is a gold mine. I can only recall his most recent outlandish claims, which were that he's been in 19 weddings this year, not attended, but been in, and that he had an overweight friend on the top floor of the World Trade Center on 9/11 who made it down to safety and now runs 15 miles a day. I was working in an open concept office where we used an instant messenger to communicate. One day, working late, it's only myself and that guy. He disappeared for like 20 minutes and then came back, but I didn't notice much. He types to me, "Hey, do you like my haircut?" And I look over and he's just locked eyes with me after shaving his head with a razor in the bathroom. I used to work with a guy who was an excellent engineer, but frequently subject to fits of rage when things didn't go well with what he was working on. Picture the scene. Typical cubicle farm with engineers hard at work, and the only sound you hear is the sound of tapping on keyboards. Suddenly, the sound of hysterical angry cursing and someone slamming their keyboard on the desk repeatedly. Everyone leaps to their feet in alarm like a bunch of prairie dogs, scanning the room for the source of the noise. Almost at once, everyone realizes that it's just Tim having another tantrum, smiles at each other, and quietly sits back down. Later, our secretary walks over to his office with a new keyboard, puts it on his desk without a word, and then walks back. A woman at my company has decided instead of paying off her student loans, she'll simply get more degrees. She's 40 plus on her 4th master's degree and does nothing but complain about schoolwork all day. Probably at least $100K in debt. No comprendo. That guy at my current company is John. John is a conspiracy theorist. He believes that the anti-theft RFID things at the doors of Walmart are designed to scan your credit cards and the metal strip in money in your wallet to see how much money you have to spend. John talks about secret CIA trains that run in tunnels under the city. John used to work for a cell phone company and tells us stories of how he installed scanners on light poles on nearly every major road to scan for a unique identifier that all vehicles emit for government tracking purposes. John believes the building we work in has chemicals applied to the HVAC system, which is making us more compliant with government programs. John will never use his ATM card to buy meals because he doesn't want the government to track what he eats. John calls a $20 bill a yuppie meal coupon. I actually thought that one was funny. Ice cream is called whipped lard. Eating at Panda Express is eating an endangered species meal. John once told me about his collection of different sized rubber gloves he has at home. He has a pair that go up to his shoulders for cleaning the bathroom. John also believed that all major leaders of the world belong to the same family tree. Also, our building has anti-earthquake devices attached to it, so the building shakes gently every so often. John claimed that the shakes were the CIA shooting mind control beams up from their underground trains. John believes our secretary at the front desk keeps a log of when John entered and left the building. Most days, John would ride the train to work, and every so often he would say, "Better stay indoors, they're spraying again." Spraying mind control drugs, that is. Sadly, John quit a few months ago. On the day he quit, he sat in his car in the parking garage for 4 hours before he worked up the guts to call his boss on the phone and quit. He instructed that his desk be boxed up and sent to his home. No one has heard from John since. My good friend Paul works in the warehouse at our company. He's gotten into every sort of trouble imaginable. He tipped a towering stack of construction materials over the back of our yard's wall. He slammed the forklift into one of our delivery trucks when he dozed off. He's gone to the wrong construction site 100 miles away from the intended delivery site. But he's a genuinely good-hearted guy, and the company's had mercy on him. He's still with us. Tons of funny stories always coming out of the warehouse from this guy. My personal favorite? Paul's an Iron Maiden fan, and he's always singing while he works. Well, one day, Paul decides to sing a parody version of Caught Somewhere in Time, with the clever lyrics of Caught with Shaft in Hand. So he's just belting out these inappropriate lyrics as he moseys over towards the will call counter. Who should walk in but one of the sales directors giving a tour of the warehouse to a new female salesperson. Paul rounds the corner, continuing the chorus with "Caught with shaft in hand," and bumps directly into the sales director. He plays it off like nothing happened, shakes his hand and the hand of the new employee, who were both giving him odd looks. To add to the hilarity, when they finally depart, we notice his fly's been down the entire time. I'm not even sure where to start. We have that family working in our warehouse. It's a mother and her son and daughter. The son was recently fired for reasons that I'll get to in a moment. They're as trashy as you can possibly be. Think of all the stereotypes and you'll have thought of them. So here's the laundry list. The mother, married to a guy that has dementia and 13 stints in his heart. They filed medical bankruptcy 3 times. Most recently, her husband tried to end himself but ended up only shooting himself in the shoulder. She always wears t-shirts with sayings that she thinks are clever. To really put the icing on the trash cake, she smokes Pall Malls. She and her children commute to work together, but every month their car gets repossessed, so they end up getting a new crappy vehicle. No one is sure how they pull that off. What, with all the bankruptcies and other bad credit issues? She watches every reality show and wants to talk about them with anyone who will listen, and doesn't understand when you tell her that you don't watch whatever it is she's talking about. So You Think You Can Dance is a prime example. The daughter. She smoked through all 4 of her pregnancies, claiming that her mother smoked when she was pregnant with her and she turned out fine. She lives in a trailer, but gets peeved if you call it a trailer because it's on a permanent foundation. She also has a Tourette's-type head twitch and blinking thing going on. She has no neck, just a head that suddenly becomes shoulders. She's constantly broke, but spends every available penny on sending her 2 daughters to beauty pageants, and then makes everyone in the company look at the pageant photos. Surprisingly, they've actually won a few. I would hate to see what the rest of the competition look like. We know she has some sort of psychosis because she has to be medicated at all times. If not, she sees and hears things that aren't there. This has led to her hiding under her desk screaming and crying. She also has some other medical condition that causes her to always be on her period. We know this because she makes us uncomfortable by talking about it all the time. Once, her husband showed up at our office, and while he was waiting for her, he told us that if he had known how crazy she was, he never would have married her, let alone had kids. To boot, she has 4 wiener dogs, one of which she claims is an attack dog that actually fended off a burglar. It was a very elaborate story that ended with a wiener dog launching himself off of the couch and into the burglar's face, drawing blood. No one was apprehended, so if you see anyone with the telltale signs of a weenie dog attack, please notify the authorities. The Son. He always has the worst gas known to man. He was inside of a shipping container unloading products with some of our other employees when he kept farting, which ultimately made all of them throw up. It was ghastly. While talking to him one day, he stuck his hand down the back of his pants and said, "Watch this." He then stuck his finger under his mom's nose and told her to sniff. He'd apparently stuck his finger in his butt because his mom threw up. He then repeated the process with his sister before she could be warned. He had to miss a month of work due to a riding lawnmower explosion. He claimed he had been blowed up. He lives in a trailer on his mom's property, but doesn't have electricity, so they just run extension cords from her trailer. He had a boil on his arm that was believed to be a staph infection, and his mother lanced it with a box cutter. It was disgusting. He had a bad habit of wrecking our forklift, and one day drove it off the loading dock. The forks went into the asphalt about 10 inches, and we had to get a special wrecker to come pull it out. A short time after that, he backed into one of the support beams in the warehouse, knocking it completely out from under the roof. The beam was at least 30 feet long, and it's amazing that no one was injured. Sometimes I would find him sleeping hidden behind pallets in our warehouse during work hours. Eventually, his sister ratted him out for being drunk on the job all the time, which explained all the forklift mishaps. When confronted by his mother about the drinking, he went crazy and tried to beat her and his sister with a baseball bat. Other employees intervened and we called the cops. He took off on foot and was apprehended later that day, vowing to get even with all of us for calling the cops. His mom didn't want us to tell them, but whatever. He was wielding a bat. Needless to say, he doesn't work here anymore. There's so much more, but those are just some of the highlights that I can think of off the top of my head. We'll call my coworker from a few years ago Ed. Ed was a British man living in the US. He had pictures of the Bush family as well as a picture of the Queen in his cubicle. He was also a bodybuilder and ate a strict diet of small meats numerous times a day. He had a lot of food pre-made and delivered to him, and he'd bring it into work. It was very common to see Ed eating, and none of us really cared since we knew it was part of his overall workout regimen. He'd often microwave single potatoes, snacks, leftovers, etc. But then there was that day Ed didn't know his fish had spoiled, and he threw it into the microwave. The office smelled horrible for the rest of the day. There was also that one time he came over to my desk with a bleeding face. He said he'd nicked himself while shaving and asked me to clean him up and bandage him. He brought alcohol, prep pads, and ointment and a band-aid. He also told me that once he wanted to have my babies, which was confusing because he was gay. I tolerated all of this because I was lonely and had a crush on him that I didn't understand and never admitted until now. There's this one guy who seems nice, but he's really quiet. He basically sits on his computer all day and browses Reddit. Whenever he's given a project, he does it quickly and goes right back to browsing. He probably thinks that we don't realize or care that he hardly does any real work. But believe me, we all know. Our guy only recently got fired. One of the conclusions we had eventually reached about him was that he was completely incapable of feeling empathy, which is not really the best person to have as your main customer support representative. But that was what he'd been hired to be. He was mostly frightening in that position because he never stopped smiling or being cheerful. even if the customer was freaking out at him or if he was bored out of his mind. This in itself doesn't cause for alarm, but he was a strange dude. On his second week in the office, he found out that there weren't any dentists that provide ozone therapists in our city. So he took 2 days off and drove to a nearby city in order to get his teeth ozoned. He would ask, "How was your weekend?" in the most interested voice you could imagine. Inflection perfect with Tobias Funke asking, "How are you?" You could tell him, sure, with him exploding into laughter at every event that happened, no matter what it was. If you asked him how his weekend was, he would be extremely sure it was a great weekend, but then wouldn't be able to recall exactly what he did, ever. After a month of working there, he started complaining that our insurance company, which he wouldn't receive benefits for until he had been there for 3 months, didn't cover his ozone therapy. He kept a steamer crockpot thing in the break room and steamed a mixture of carrots and spinach every single morning, which he would then eat out of a bowl at around 10 a.m. The smell was atrocious, and everyone complained about it the first day he did it, until we found out someone was making that horrible smell on purpose. He called it borscht for unknown reasons, which our Russian salesman nearly flipped out over every time the word came up. He was kind of an idiot when it came to support as well. We have a support ticket system that handles all of our clients for all of the different services we offer. He actually had copy pasta that he was putting into every single ticket with a lot of idiotic troubleshooting steps that didn't apply to 75% of our clientele. When someone called in to report our support center was down, he asked them to submit a support ticket about it. He was overall a bit of a know-it-all, being very good at selling clients things that they didn't need and would later complain they spent thousands of dollars on. By the time he was fired, clients would call in and immediately ask to be forwarded to sales, even for stupid support issues, just so they wouldn't have to talk to him. Not as bad as some people's that guy, but by the time he was fired, everyone in the office was being driven up the wall. Our number of support tickets submitted this past month are at 50% of what they were at last year, after a steady increase for the rest of the year, and I'm fairly certain it's his fault. I will say this, don't discount that guy too quickly. An old friend of mine used to share stories about a coworker that would always say and do wildly inappropriate things, much along the lines of the original poster's examples, and including picking food off of said friend's plate in the break room, uninvited of course. My friend was nice to the guy anyway, despite the annoyances, and considered him a friend. Anyway, long story short, my friend died suddenly one day after he'd quit his job with that guy a while back. The guy was on his Facebook friends and ended up producing quite an outpouring of feelings and sympathy with the family and friends of the deceased. He would note every time he drove by my friend's old house or anything, and not obnoxiously, but in a very genuine and caring way. He was very kind and supportive to all of us that were grieving. He obviously was a very caring and very friendly individual, just totally socially inept. The moral of the story? Some of those guys are just totally weird, but some are actually really nice people that just don't know how to interact well. Give them a chance and you might make an invaluable friend for life. This guy was far more loyal than the trite normal people my friend had worked with, some of which made brief and non-sentimental remarks on his death. That guy seemed to be the only one that was really truly affected by this. Oh man. Last year, I worked with the most intense guy ever. He was ex-military going back to school for his 3rd undergrad or something. On one particular day while we were listening to NPR, a story came on about someone getting shot during a home robbery. Apparently in South Dakota, there's a law which states if someone breaks into your house, you can shoot them dead and not go to jail. I simply stated that I don't think I would be able to kill a person. And he screams in my face, covering me with spittle, "But it's your right!" It became kind of a meme for the other interns. In another instance, he went on a rage to me about how dumb women are, and I'm a woman, and that their only purposes are for breeding and feeding. I got peeved, slam on the brakes, kick him out of the truck, and tell him he's in timeout and I'll be back when he's not going to be a jerk. Best memory ever. Made even better since we were on an Indian reservation and he was not very fond of natives. There's a man at the grocery store I work at. We'll call him Monty because that's his name. I hate this man. He embodies everything that is wrong with society. and fills so many stereotypes it isn't even funny. He's from New Jersey, therefore in his mind he must be a mobster. He acts this way all the time, to everyone. Heavy Brooklyn accent, even though he's never been to New York, self-admittedly. Unnecessarily argumentative and overly confrontational about anything. He acts like people asking him to do things like his job is an affront to him, on par with assaulting his mother and kicking the Pope in the balls. This man is built like a 3/4 full sack of crap with thinning hair, zero charisma, and yet he still hits on the female minors we have working here. Did I mention this man is about 70 years old? Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what's the worst way you've seen someone screw over their spouse? My uncle represented this guy getting a divorce from his wife of 15 years. Super toxic breakup, and they split everything 50-50. Even the land that the house they lived in sat upon. Well, she decided to build a house right behind the other house. Mind you, this was a lot of land, probably 200 yards separating both home sites. So the back of the houses faced each other. The house gets built and my uncle gets a call from his client asking about the legality of a situation he'd gotten himself into. Apparently, his ex-wife would spend a lot of time in her backyard, so he saw her all the time. What he did was buy a female dog and name it the same name as his ex-wife. Anytime he would let his dog back in from her being outside, he would yell, "Susan, you B-word, get in here!" He would also yell if she was peeing on the flowers. "Susan, you B-word, quit peeing on the flowers!" Or, "Susan, you B-word, quit digging in the dirt." The ex-wife called the cops on him a couple of times, but there was nothing they could do because the dog was registered under the name of Susan, and she was in fact a female dog. So there you go. The couple separated 10 years ago, but didn't officially divorce until a couple years ago. She was going to get his house, so he burned it down, then faxed her the transfer of ownership forms. He might be going to jail for arson though. I worked at a law firm that was subpoenaed as part of a divorce between a partner at the firm and a partner at another major law firm. The woman issued more than 70 subpoenas to banks, firms, investment companies, you name it. She was convinced he had squirreled away $20+ million overseas behind her back. It got so bad that she dug up receipts from 25 years ago to try to put together his grand conspiracy puzzle. In the end, after she racked up $1.5 million in legal fees and 7 different lawyers, the judge said that this is ridiculous. There was no conspiracy, and you're not entitled to a portion of this phantom $20 million. Mind you, this was a major law firm partner who was acting this way. She made millions per year in her career, but she apparently lost her mind. Bad separation. Wife filed a restraining order on the husband. Very common. Wasn't a terrible guy, but not great either. A year into the divorce, his mother was dying. He asked his sister to speak with his ex-wife and asked to bring the kids to see her in the hospital before she died. The wife never did. Instead, she went to the court and said he violated the restraining order by trying to contact her. You can't contact someone through another party. He admitted to it and explained the situation, but was found in breach of the order. His mother died while he was locked up, and the wife never brought the kids to see her. Story from my parents who are lawyers. So throughout the divorce proceedings, there was a car that was a huge point of contention between the husband and wife. After months and months of saying he would never let the wife have the car, the husband concedes in exchange for something great, like one of their summer houses. It turns out he'd been driving the car for 3 hours every day in a big loop around the city, putting thousands and thousands of miles on it, basically making it worthless. The amount of planning and spite that went into that was amazing. I did some consulting work for 2 divorce attorneys when I was in grad school. Their client was a career airline pilot. His wife worked part-time, so there was a huge income disparity. It was an ugly divorce. During the process, but before the final decree, tax time rolled around. The wife's attorney calls my guys and says, her accountant just called. If they can just share their W-2s and file jointly, they each stand to save about $8,000 over filing separately. My guys took that info to the husband. He says, "Screw her. Losing $8,000 is going to be way worse for her than it will for me." Cold as ice, man. Over here in the Netherlands, most legal costs are paid for by the government if your income is below a certain threshold. In practice, this means that if one of the spouses in a divorce has little to no income and the other one has a normal income, the one with the normal income will have to pay a lot if the process drags on. Considering there are plenty of ways to drag it on, I've seen cases approach ridiculous amounts of billable hours. There is a catch to this, however. Your lawyer is paid a set amount if he or she is paid by the government. However, should the money you receive after a divorce or whatever exceed a certain number, you're expected to pay your own lawyer, which is the reason we still keep track of the hours in these cases. So this one woman who thought she was screwing over her ex-husband by dragging the divorce over multiple years got a payout of 40,000 euros by the end of it. Unfortunately for her, she had to surrender most of that straight back in lawyer costs. There was a certain sense of justice in there. Also proves time and again that when there is conflict, the only true winners are usually the lawyers. Banker here. Had heaps of situations where joint overdraft/credit card comes up just before the divorce to absolutely surprise one of the parties. Drained down to zero, of course. Especially bad when it's students or young kids who find themselves heartbroken after the breakup and with debt they can't afford. I had a guy who was married to a woman who slept with another guy, had that other guy's baby, and never told the husband. Then, for other reasons, they start filing divorce proceedings. A paternity test is done, the husband finds out the kid isn't his, and the courts rule that he still has to pay child support because it's in the best interests of the kid. I handled a divorce between a wife who was a teacher and a husband who was a CVS cashier. I represented the wife. For all intents and purposes, the wife was the breadwinner of the family, and she supported herself, her husband, and their 2 children. I should note, one of the children was severely autistic and required intensive and expensive rehab and education. During the process of the divorce, the husband, living alone, sued the wife, caring for both children, for temporary spousal support. He met all the statutory guidelines to receive it, but it just came off as slimy. At the day of the hearing, the judge reviewed all of the facts and spent 20 minutes tearing the husband a new one. He called him a vile creature that was everything wrong with society. The judge then told us that his hands were tied and that he was forced to grant the spousal support, but he let everyone know how little he thought of the husband. As we were leaving the court, the husband just kept saying to my crying client, "Just like Goodfellas, screw you, pay me." It was literally humanity at its worst. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but being a banker, I get to delve into the personal lives of people, and this is what a customer had told me. Well, basically, the divorce was cut and dry, but as a professional, that's not my business why. But I'm worried about his financials though. My guy was the breadwinner in the house. He was a construction foreman, I believe, so he was the guy planning, paying, and watching his employees. He was great. Apparently, his wife wanted everything. But the thing that ticked him off the most was the fact that she took the boat. His boat that he had purchased before ever meeting her. The funny thing is though, she can't afford anything to move the boat with, like a truck. So he had to legitimately move his boat with his truck to some place she was staying at and just leave it. He lost his boat. He asked me at the end how old I was. I tell him 21. He told me never to get married. I'll get to keep all my stuff at the end. I saw a future ex-wife fight vigorously over disability benefits of a not yet retired career military guy. She had a new guy to bankroll her and legal fees were nothing to her. So she dragged out asset division and divorce proceedings for months over not yet accrued disability benefits of her soon-to-be ex-husband. Total amount to which she would have been entitled? About $400. That is before Supreme Court decided disability benefits are not marital property. It was some very petty bull. Wife and husband number 1 divorce with a child. Wife gets custody of child. Husband number 1 pays child support. Wife marries husband number 2. Husband number 2 adopts the child. Husband number 1 is no longer on the hook for child support as husband number 2 is now legally the father. Wife and husband number 2 get a divorce. Because of the adoption, husband number 2 has to pay child support for the child. Wife remarries husband number 1. Now the child lives with husband number 1, the biological father, and husband number 2, the adoptive father, still has to pay child support. My wife is a divorce attorney, so she told me about this one. The couple was still living together during the divorce process, but separate bedrooms and all that. Anytime the husband would buy a snack like chips or crackers, he'd come home to his soon-to-be ex-wife, who would smash the bag until the snack was dust but never open it. So anytime he'd go to eat a snack that he thought was new, he'd only end up disappointed. He was not awarded a restraining order or anything for this either. He was super mad about the dust snacks, however. I was a clerk of the court and we handled a lot of divorce files. You wouldn't believe how many people submit nude pictures of their soon-to-be exes into court to record as evidence. Not because the pictures are relevant in any way to divorce proceedings, but simply to humiliate them. Court files, unless sealed by the judge, are public record, so anyone who cares to look can access the court file and all the exhibits. Family court is the most depressing division. Don't send nudes to people. The husband cheated on his wife and she found out. One day, she went back to their old house and put shrimp in all the curtain rods. The husband, who was trying to sell the house, couldn't figure out where the smell was coming from. He ends up selling it at a massive loss and below value due to the smell. The wife was the one who ended up buying it. The husband was a pretty good dude, as he was a good dad to the kids and was a good provider for the family. He wanted to get the divorce over with as amicably as possible, but the wife, who had actually cheated on him, wanted everything, including the guy's soul apparently. She got the house, custody of the kids, and alimony, but they both ended up racking up thousands of extra dollars in attorney's fees over a vase and a journal. Both items belonged to the husband's grandmother and were her only possessions that made it through the Holocaust before she immigrated to the US. The judge ended up ruling that the wife got possession of those items too. As soon as she got her hands on them, she smashed the vase with a hammer and burned the journal. She left the pieces of the vase and the ashes of the journal at the doorway of his one-bedroom apartment he had been financially forced to move into. I did some work for the attorney on this case. Local investment broker who's done well. Strong practice and very affluent client base. Wife owns a small shop in the local community. A pet pastime. Doesn't really turn profit. Been trying to get pregnant for a couple of years. Working with reproductive doctors and clinics. Wife finally gets pregnant. 1 in a million chance. Has the baby and it's a boy. Fast forward a couple of months. The wife has to go to the market for her shop and takes a day trip to the big city a couple of hours away. The husband prepared for this and takes the opportunity to have the baby tested for paternity. Not his. When they started at the fertility clinic, he was tested and knew he was shooting blanks. So he contacts his attorney, my boss, and we start the plan. While we're preparing the case, we have a PI follow his wife. He follows her to a few doctor visits, tennis lessons, lunch at the country club daily, and hanging out with her friends. Her friends decide to throw her a birthday party at the country club. This is our opportunity. I serve her the divorce papers, loudly asking her name and, after confirming, announce the reason for the divorce: infidelity. You are hereby ordered to appear in the blank county court, blah blah blah. Her friends are stunned. Discovery reveals that she and her friends are all cheating in the same circles. We go to court and present evidence showing the husband is not the father and request to have his name removed from the birth certificate. The judge, not wanting the child to become a ward of the state, orders her to produce a list of all the people she slept with during the reasonable window of conception. She provides the list. During the next court appearance, 10 men show up running the full gamut of personalities. 1 doctor, 1 architect, a tennis coach, 2 chefs, 1 trust fund prince, and a few others to round out the mix. One was actually the father of the person they really needed, but when she said John Doe, she didn't specify John Doe Jr. All were ordered to take a DNA test. Our client succeeds in getting his name removed from the birth certificate, no child support, and no alimony. Wife strikes a deal with the baby daddy for child support and support payments for a number of years. She does end up winning. It was the doctor. Part of the agreement is she has to move from the area, paid for by the doctor. NDA signed. The doctor was very rich and must protect his name and reputation. The court allowed no dad on the birth certificate because of guaranteed support for the child, a trust fund. The wife was at work when the husband closed on their house, but he took his mom and she signed the papers. Years later, they divorce and wife demands the house, but gets an eviction notice from the mom. Wife had no idea they'd been paying rent. I was approached to handle a post-divorce enforcement proceeding. The guy was owed somewhere in the neighborhood of like $5,000, which hadn't been paid in a few years and was already reduced to judgment. He reached out because he found some money she was squirreling away and he wanted the judgment enforced against it. The money was funds raised through a firehouse benefit dinner which was held for cancer treatments because she was uninsured. I declined. I had an epic client who hated his wife's guts. He was asked to pay an interim maintenance of rupees, $3,000 per month. This guy goes to the bank and gets $3,000, all in 1 rupee coins, and gives it to his wife in court. Technically, it's legal. So the wife had to sit and count all the coins in court, and then he says he wants the bag back. Technically, it's his bag. So this lady is left with 3,000 coins and no way to carry it home. This guy was an evil genius. I used to be a paralegal, but not a lawyer. I remember reading about one case that I couldn't remember the name of when I went to look for it. The parties had about $15 million in assets, and the husband had owned about 90% of the assets going into the marriage. The courts wanted to award the wife about $2 million and give the husband the rest, and the husband wanted to leave her destitute. He ended up spending all of his money to fight at every step of the way by filing frivolous motions and just generally doing whatever he could to be a jerk. After attorney fees, penalties and costs, and money wasted on schemes, the total remaining assets the parties had was about $500K. The courts awarded all of it to the wife and left him completely broke. Guy wins lottery big time. Millions. Never tells his wife. Technically, half belongs to her. Taxes already taken, so he just needs to note it in tax forms, which wife always signs without looking. Divorce. Husband offers no hassle. Generous divorce settlement, which her lawyer advises her to take. He moves to a nearby town and lives normally, gradually losing touch with everyone who knows him. Then he moves again, losing touch with everyone. That's when he starts spending the dough. This one's a bit of a story, but here goes. The guy lives on his family farm all his life. His mother lives with him, but the father had already passed away. One day, his mom says he should get a wife as he starts getting a bit older himself. He finds someone online. She has a teenage daughter already, but whatever. Things move along and they're all living together on the farm. He does the farming and decides to let her handle the books. The wife then sees how much money this guy's actually got and starts spending a lot of it. Sends the daughter to private schools, starts buying expensive things, etc., etc. But she doesn't pay the farm's bills. The land was still on mortgage. He finds out because he gets a call from the bank saying that he's past due and nothing's been paid. He ends up losing the farm. He gets into a big argument with his wife. They split up. She gets him and his mother kicked out of the house, even though it was their house to begin with. So he leaves to the city. He doesn't like it. After all, he was farming out in the country all his life. So he calls up his friend, asks if he can come back to town and stay at his place. Friend says sure. He arrives at his friend's house. The friend isn't there. Instead, he finds his ex-wife and her daughter. He snapped. He took a gun from his vehicle and shot and killed them both. I've got a few stories from my husband who's an attorney. A man had been assaulting his 5-year-old daughter and the wife found out about it, left him and filed for custody. The vindictive SOB accused his wife of assaulting the daughter just so she wouldn't get custody either. The girl went to his wife's parents and suddenly the husband remembers that the wife's parents also assaulted her too. Again, all this just so that the wife wouldn't get custody. The girl ended up in foster care for a whole year while the investigations went on, and the wife and her parents were cleared. The father served time and is now allowed supervised visits. Then there was a woman who was married to a man who sold guns for a living and loved hunting more than anything. She accused him of domestic violence because she knew he would no longer be allowed to own or carry guns. Next, a woman in the middle of a divorce invited her soon-to-be ex to reconnect, seduced him, and offered him alcohol, then threw him out of the house. She called the cops and reported seeing someone swerving on the road. He was arrested, taken to jail, and lost his job because of the DUI. His job involved driving. Lastly, a man told his wife that he would give up custody of their twin daughters if she agreed not to go after spousal support or ask to split any assets. She agreed and the divorce was finalized. The day the papers were signed, he went after full custody of the twins, saying that he could take better care of them because he had a big house and she only had an apartment, and he made more money and things like that. Just to leave her with as little as possible, he told his attorney. When the judge wouldn't grant him custody because of their previous arrangement, he went after one of them and permanently split up the twins. So many stories, but generally the cases that sickened me the most went like this. Wife has baby. Husband has zero interest in child and even resents the attention that the child takes away from him. Tells wife that she is 100% responsible for this child, even financially. Wife realizes that husband is a jerk parent and that makes him a jerk partner. She would actually rather be a single parent than deal with his man-baby nonsense. Divorce petition is filed. The husband is told by his lawyer that the more time he has with his kid, the less child support he'll have to pay. The husband starts going to doctor appointments, doing stuff with the child, and, being a parent. The parties are now divorced. Husband has a 50-50 timeshare and is a doting father. All wife wanted was for husband to take an interest in the child, but she had to divorce him to get it. I had this case while working as a law clerk. The husband had a fancy job and got stationed abroad, so the wife and 2 kids moved with him. He got a really high salary, all expenses paid, while the wife was a stay-at-home mom with no income of her own. The marriage ended up failing and they moved back home to Sweden, and the wife sued for alimony, which she was entitled to by law, so she would be able to take care of the kids every other week. She hadn't worked for a number of years and had a hard time getting back into the job market, no savings, etc. Suddenly, the husband, who basically hadn't had to pay any bills for several years, claimed he was also broke. He only had around $1 million or so and was forced to spend it on an apartment in one of the most expensive parts of town so he had somewhere to live. People who quit a job in the heat of the moment, what chaos did you leave them to handle? I didn't get a bonus because they felt the overtime I did paid me more than the bonus they gave to everyone else. I didn't know what to say after that, so after a few hours, I offered to get coffee for everyone. I left and never came back or contacted them again. I keep thinking that I should go back with coffee now that I've been gone for 10 years and just act normal. When I was a programmer at an insurance company, one of the longtime programmers had been with the company for nearly 20 years. This guy originally wrote most of the financial system himself, from scratch, and had maintained it with the help of a couple other people. Every month he did the month-end processing, and every quarter he did the quarter-end processing. Every year-end? Yep, it was him. There was a change in management a couple of times, and he kept getting treated worse and worse. He was being treated unfairly, asked to do unreasonably more work than he was already doing, getting thrown under the bus, that kind of thing. He finally had enough, and one morning he came in, walked to the manager's office and quit, then walked out the door. In the aftermath, it took a team of 4 other people months and months to get things back together and to a point where things were serviceable. I got stabbed in the shoulder while working as a bookmaker, or betting shop manager. I was the only key holder, and while the paramedics were tending to me, the area manager was on the phone asking me to open the store the next day. I closed shop for the day, came back once I got out of the hospital, put my keys in the safe, and left my notice on the desk. The store didn't open for 3 days while they sorted a field manager. I worked for a landscape company doing new installs. Our owner was cheap with a bad habit of constantly biting off more than he could chew. One year, he asked if we wanted any part of a school project in a city we didn't live in, over 2 hours away, and we said no. He said that was fine and would just bid on one school for his crew who lived in that area. Instead, he bid on multiple schools and got 3 of them. Obviously, none of us are happy about this, and he claimed that he'd put us up in hotels so we wouldn't have to commute. He never did. The work itself sucked, way more than a crew our size could handle, and the owner's brother did absolutely nothing. He was supposed to be the project manager / supervisor, but literally all he did was play Clash of Clans on his phone and yell at people about not being fast enough. After a few days, I was done. I'd grown sick of the job anyway, but this project really sealed the deal. Having to commute 4+ hours a day and then physically destroy myself was taking a toll fast. I woke up Friday morning, called the owner, told him I quit and to stop taking more work than he can manage. He blew up, but I just hung up the phone and went back to sleep. 2 weeks later, I get a call from him. He's begging me to come back because after I quit, 2 other guys did too. The project is now woefully behind schedule and he's going to get fined if things don't pick up and get finished. I told him he should have thought of that before he bit off more than he could chew and expected a small crew to do it all in a short time frame. He got quiet and then asked if a 50-cent raise would get me back. No, that was the last time I ever heard from him, and I can't find his company website anymore. I was an 18-year-old assistant manager at a big pizza franchise. I'd been working open to close for 2 weeks straight because the new GM went on vacation right after taking over the store. When she got back from her vacation, she only worked a half day. I opened and still closed. Then she changed the schedule and took 2 days off. This was the last straw on top of a ton of other crap piled over a year. Multiple new GMs, crappy district manager, awful store politics. I was alone during an unusually large lunch rush and was just done with everyone's crap. I had a make line full of orders, phones ringing, oven full of pizza, orders to be picked up, and a massive bunch of dough sitting on the prep table. I said screw it. I shut the oven off, walked out, and locked the door. Didn't call anyone to let them know. It would be hours before the evening driver would roll in. No prep for the day, no dough for the day, except for the blob I'm sure would become a massive mess after rising for hours. A double-deck oven with both belts full of pies wasted, and what was probably shaping to be a $1,200 lunch out the window. I hope she was well rested after her time off. Shoppers Drug Mart. I had simply asked for better hours after working ridiculous late night hours for over a year. Instead, they hired a new guy and gave him the exact hours I asked for and then had me train him. So when training wasn't going very well because the new guy was super slow, they blamed me for it. Now, I had a good standing with everyone at this store, but I didn't need shoppers, and I let a lot of crap slide every day. So again, when I asked for vacation that I deserved because I was never sick and punctual as heck, I was denied it. And the next day, the manager had 4 weeks of vacation set. So to make it up to me, they offered me all these insane overtime shifts for the next 3 weeks. So I waited for the frozen deliveries to arrive that same day. The boss was packing up to go home, and when he said goodnight to me, I said, "But who's gonna do this frozen delivery?" He laughed and said, "You are." So I replied, "Nope." And he became super cross, so I started laughing. "What are you laughing about?" he says. So I said, "Screw you, I quit." Now there was no one to finish the night shift. He immediately asks for the uniform. I said, "No, screw you, I quit." I had never done that before or since. Uniform went in the trash. I always worked the close shift at a fast food joint. My managers loved to hand out citations for any little thing. The policy was 3 strikes and you're out. I had 2 strikes and was told to clean up the entire front end and bathroom in an hour or risk getting a 3rd strike. To put things in perspective, I had to close the register, count the money, clean up the front end, restock everything, sweep and mop the floors, and clean the entire bathroom, including the toilets, for basically $8.05. I walked into the bathroom just to see what to expect. It looked like someone had finished projectile pooping all over the toilet and then decided to pee next to the sink. I knew I wouldn't be able to do everything in an hour, and that I would get fired regardless. So I took my uniform off and walked home shirtless. I worked as an engineer at the mill, and was responsible for operation and process adjustment of certain pieces of equipment. I was able to make it work better than specified results, but my managers required more production, less power, etc. So at this point, the machines reached its capacity, and further pushing it was risky and a huge amount of investment was needed. I was told by the higher-ups that, "You didn't even try to do it, only said some lame excuses." I was done with this and called to the manufacturer of this equipment. Long story short, instead of instructions and advice, they sent me a job offer for local service rep. After I quit the mill, my ex-colleagues tried to push the machine above the limits and successfully broke it and stopped the production for a couple of weeks. I worked as a small engine repair tech for a larger company. I'm also in the National Guard. I had gotten hurt and needed physical therapy, and 1 or 2 days a month I would have to miss because of an extended drill weekend. Well, my boss didn't like that, and she decided that she would punish me by making me stay later than everyone else. She was punishing me for going to physical therapy for a workplace injury and for being a soldier. Now, you may be thinking, having to stay late to keep up on your work doesn't sound like that much of a punishment. Normally, you would be right, but trust me, she was doing a lot more to make sure it was a punishment. Well, one day after being told I was not given approval for the 1 day of vacation I had asked for 3 months in advance to go see the eclipse and generally being treated like a slave, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? And clocked out at the end of my shift. That next Monday after drill weekend, I showed up, packed up all my tools and took off. My boss started freaking out when she saw what I was doing. I left and found out that me leaving cost her over $100,000 because she had to ship my workload to another state to get another shop to work on them. That meant she needed to pay to ship them and then pay to ship them back. And since her shop didn't do any of the actual work, she never saw any money for any of the repairs. It was like 80 riding lawnmowers. I had a job as a fairly niche field service engineer in IT. Started off covering my local area, which was fine. Maybe an hour traveling time to my most remote site tops. Then they lost an engineer in my adjacent territory, and I had to cover that too. This put my travel time up to about 2.5 hours each way. That wasn't great, but it was temporary, allegedly. Then they lost another engineer, and guess what? I had to cover that area too. That meant I was having to do up to 4 hours driving each way just to get to a site. And then they expected me to put in a full 8-hour day. I mentioned this to my manager and pointed out that if I was pulling multi-day jobs at a site 4 hours away, it would be far better for them to put me up in a hotel. But they said, nah, as it was unusual for me to do multi-day installs. Anyway, a month or so later, I was expected to put in a complete new system at a site, spec'd up to 4 full days to do it. High-profile client, and I basically told my manager I needed a hotel. They pushed back. It's only 4 days, you'll be fine. Just charge them the travel time as worked hours. Which is fine, but I was salaried, and they were the ones invoicing the client, so no overtime for me. Anyway, on the second day, I arrived at nearly lunchtime after a massive accident on the motorway held me up for 4 hours, and was greeted by the client chewing me out. I thought, screw this, packed my tools, left the site with their old system ripped out, and a pile of unopened boxes of new kit, switched off my mobile and drove to the head office. I parked close enough to the main entrance that the car operated the automatic doors, went into reception and told the receptionist, very politely, it wasn't her fault, that I quit. All my gear was in the car and here are my keys, phone, and pass. Then walked out and got a cab home. I found out from a friend that they lost that client, which was one of their main ones, even after my manager basically spent the rest of the week installing the kit on his own without any documentation, since I'd written the spec and accidentally kept it. I spent some time working at a gas station where my supervisor would take about 20 smoke breaks a day while demanding that the rest of us work harder. After several days of this and my boss not doing anything about it, I quit in the middle of a pizza order rush. Oh boy, let me tell you about my last day of Walmart. It's Monday morning, my day off, and I was pulling out of my doctor's office after getting blood work done when I receive a call from my manager. Let's just call her Demon Queen. Demon Queen asks me to come into work because of 2 call-offs. Thinking that I didn't have anything else planned and could use the overtime, I agreed. I informed her over the phone it would take me an hour to get home, dress, and drive to work. All I heard from her was an annoyed, "Fine, just get here." 1 hour later, I arrived at work. Just as I was getting to the deli where I work, my manager, who was behind the counter by herself, starts yelling at me for being late, in front of not 1, not 2, but a line of customers. I attempt to remind her of our conversation, but she cuts me off, tosses her apron, and storms out of the deli. I'm forced to shrug it off, apologize to the customers, and get to work. Later, I have a customer walk to the deli and ask about our rotisserie chicken, something not uncommon. I explain it'll be over an hour before they're ready, and suggest driving 5 minutes north to the other Walmart. He nods, thanks me, and walks away towards the front. I thought nothing of it, and continued to cook popcorn chicken. 5 minutes later, the same customer comes back with none other than the Demon Queen herself, who's asking me about the rotisserie chicken. I once again attempt to explain how long the chicken has left to cook and the suggestion I made. No sooner am I finished speaking than she berates me for being lazy and telling a customer to go elsewhere. I ask what else is there I could do, as I couldn't make the oven cook faster. Her next words stick to this day. "I want you to do your job or you can kiss it goodbye." A moment of pause from everyone. Zoe and May have been listening in the entire time, as well as the customers they were helping. I ponder, then smile. Okay. I apologize to Zoe and May, wish them the best of luck, and walk out of the deli towards my manager. I stop in front of her, take off my apron, kiss it, say goodbye, and walk out of the store. I still have my name badge and hat to this day. I worked 25 years for a large company in the sales division. I was making 6 figures and had earned my role as VP of the West Coast. My plan was to stick around to retirement, but then we got a new president, and the new president was a jerk to everyone. I saw one sales guy walk up all excited and offer a handshake to meet him. The president didn't shake the extended hand, and instead said,
"I can't believe you came here without polishing your shoes."
The president gave a directive for me to stop hiring people with business or sales experience and to just start hiring attractive men and women, because in his words,
"Their good looks will sell product better than the educated words of a veteran salesperson. Plus, they're young and work cheaper."
I went along with this request and made 2 such hires. Then the next request came along.
"Tell me, who is the worst member of your team right now?"
I explained that my team was number 1 in the company and that we're all doing well. But the weakest one would have to be one 8-year employee who had had a bad year last year. He was making less frequent calls and the quality of calls was dropping. I had to place him on PIP to improve in 3 months. And he did. He busted his butt, worked long hours and weekends, and moved into the number 1 spot on my team. At the end of the 3 months, the president calls me to discuss the PIP. I explain the great progress and that I want to release him from the PIP because he's on track now. The reply was,
"Well, there's probably other things wrong with him anyway, so terminate him and document it. Make sure to hire a young, attractive person as a replacement."
I quit on the spot with 0 days notice, unusual for a white-collar job, and told him to do his own dirty work. Now I work as a high school teacher. I worked in shipping and receiving for a health food store. Over the past 5 days, everyone else had quit, including supervisors and department heads. I was working a frozen shipment, my regular job. Dairy came in and cheese came in, a little bit over $130,000. Huge fancy cheese and whole wheels, a large generally organic dairy shipment. I refused to sign anything. GM demanded I sign and put it away. Signing was already out of my pay grade. Those numbers made it way out of my pay grade. He then demanded I put it all away. It would have taken the rest of the shift for my own work. I just quit. Screw it. I heard that he signed it and it all went to waste. He ended up getting fired. I've only done this once in my life, but it was a really crazy situation. My first professional job was an event planner for a small business, like 3 people. I was 24 and I worked there for a year. After about 5 months, my boss became extremely abusive. She would make snide little remarks about my terrible skills or time management or organizing. She stopped talking to me and would basically act like I wasn't there unless it was to criticize me for something. One day, she asked me if I implemented a new filing system she had learned from the bank she used to work at. I replied no, as she hadn't yet shown me how to do so. She said, with a stack of papers in her hand, "Well, I guess giving you these would just be useless then." Another example is that she would find little ways in which I was being pert or snide in some way, usually something completely BS, and would make me sign forms saying we had meetings about my behavior and listed all the things we would do to change it and help me grow. Like I worked for a big corporation or something with an HR department, not a private office with literally one boss. If I argued why I wasn't doing so, she made me sign something saying I was refusing training. I literally have no idea who those papers were for. Things like that. It made me so paranoid and unhappy, I spent many lunches crying in my car, and many nights completely stressed out after work. I couldn't understand what had changed, and felt so stupid and helpless. My coworker had just left, so it was just the 2 of us, and I gave my 2 weeks because the thought of being alone in an office with her was unbearable. As soon as I left her office, she called her mom to complain about me ditching her and talked about how happy she would be with me gone. All while I was about 10 feet away in another room with the doors open. I lost it, got up from my desk and grabbed my purse, went to her office and told her I was leaving for good, right this minute. I was shaking and terrified, and she was furious. She told me, "Good luck finding another job in this town. I know everybody." Spoiler alert, I did. The kicker? What I didn't know at the time was that my coworker had been feeding her BS the whole time. When it started to affect how I was being treated and I would complain or talk about it, guess who also told my boss all of that? Yup, with many embellishments of course. I had 0 experience with people like that and overlooked many clues, like how she would stay after work a lot to finish her assignments, when in reality she was staying to tattle on me. I was just so new to the real world and naive. I found all of this out a few months later from one of her friends I ran into who she had also screwed over in some way. It made me stronger, and after I left, my boss had to deal with scrambling to find people to do all of her events, and I'm sure it was hell. I felt happy about that at first, but now that I'm 10 years older, I can see things differently. She definitely could have handled it better, but it was her first boss job too, and she maybe had some things to learn herself. I quit from a gaming site I used to write for. This all happened in the span of 2 months. The new owner made us writers lose all credibility by writing unedited articles on his own and posting them freely, and they were the most widely ridiculous and racist pieces I'd ever read. In one of them, he said women only bought the Wii because they used the Wiimote as a vibrator. It just made the rest of us look bad. He fired my friend simply because he didn't like him. He tried to claim my friend kept our review copy of Skyward Sword. There was more stuff that he did that I can't remember. My father died in December of that year. I informed everyone. I had also lost internet access for a while because my provider was switching the way their routers and stuff connected. I had too much going on at the time to deal with that. When I connected to the McDonald's Wi-Fi one day, I read a barrage of emails from the new owner, all amounting to, "Where are you?" and "Why aren't you writing anything?" I emailed him and CC'd everyone on the writing staff and told him he could go screw himself. 90% of the writing staff followed. 5 writers quit that day, and people took notice. The site never recovered, and today it only exists as a landing page and hub for one podcast that just refuses to die. After that, the owner took to stalking the guy who hired most of his writing staff, online harassment, and most recently, he hacked the previous owner's email and stole his Destiny 2 review code. He's still out there being a jerk, but I only hear about it since I have him blocked on all social media. What do insanely poor people buy that ordinary people know nothing about? Growing up, my family had its moments of struggle. Our public transport system at the time had tickets which were simply hole punched with the date and month, not the year. So we'd save them and store them neatly in envelopes marked by month and concession or full fare. After a few years of saving tickets, we pretty much had free train and bus travel for the next 10 years, until they changed the ticketing system to electronically stamped tickets with barcodes. My office only has a unisex bathroom, so it has the facilities for men and women. Naturally, there's a tampon machine, and tampons are only 5 cents. Once a month, I'll work late, get a roll of nickels, and fill up a grocery sack with tampons for my wife. Extended stay housing or motels/hotels. When you can't qualify to get an apartment because you don't have proof of income, you end up wasting more money to stay for a week at an extended day housing or a cheap motel. It sucks having no home and being a transient. I promise myself never to be in the same situation again. I was so poor once that I would go to Long John Silver's and order a water and crunchies, which used to be free, then sit there and watch the people that would dine in. It was amazing how little they ate, and then they would leave without dumping their tray off in the trash. Fries, hush puppies, chicken, fish, all untouched. No, I didn't eat a piece that was bitten off of. I once saw a woman order a 2-piece fish and more for her kid that ate 1 hush puppy and a few fries, and then left the rest of it there. It was the best I had eaten in weeks. Glad that's behind me now. Lots of school systems do free lunches for kids under 18 during the summer. When I was a kid, I remember my dad taking us to get lunch at the school, then go play disc golf, soccer, or do something else free and fun. It was a blast, and I had no clue it was because we were poor. Dollar theaters, and sometimes they have a free afternoon or evening show for kids with the purchase of a parent ticket. Many movies were seen by the 3 of us for $4 with a shared popcorn and Coke. My dad was amazing at making us feel rich on basically nothing. When I was a child, Burger King ran a special kids meal where it was 2 mini burgers that were attached to each other like a weird conjoined burger experiment. Sometimes we would go. My dinner was 1.5 of the mini burgers. My mom was the half I didn't eat, and she would fill up on the free refills of soda. I've been both very poor and very comfortable. A lot of very true statements are already posted here, but here's what I haven't noticed. When you're broke, you can't plan ahead or shop sales or buy in bulk. People have to wait to buy something until they absolutely need it, so they have to pay whatever the price is at that moment. If 10 packs of paper towels are on sale for half price, that's great, but you can only afford 1 roll anyway. In this way, poor people actually pay more than others for common staple goods. Stuff on layaway. My mom would always go to this store that sold heavily discounted irregulars and put it on layaway for our new school clothes. This is actually a good question that can illustrate something. When you're poor, the system is set up to keep you that way. For example, how much do you pay to cash your paycheck? If you aren't and have never been poor, you probably said pay because you don't. Your check probably goes via direct deposit right into your checking account. But what if you have bad credit history such that you can't get a checking account? Well, now you have to pay to go to a check cashing service and pay money to get it. This means that out of your already low check, you get a few dollars less. If you're lucky, you can find a grocery store that will give your fee back and certificates to the store. But even then, they might charge you a small fee on top of that. How about this? How much is your car insurance? Did you know that if you get bad credit, it's higher? So now that you're poor, you get to pay more money for your insurance. And you'll find that the only landlord that will rent to you at a place not in the absolute worst part of town will ask you to double your deposit since you've had financial trouble in the past. It gets a lot worse. Your bad credit combined with your shaky job history and barren wasteland of a savings mean your options for transportation are severely limited. If you need a car, you'll have to go to one of those lots. Have you ever driven a car into the ground? I mean, put like 200,000 miles on it and drive it until it just doesn't want to go anymore? Then you take your jalopy into the local reputable Honda dealer and they give you $20 and a Snicker bar for it. What do you think they do with it? They certainly don't sell it at their lot, that's for sure. They aren't going to park your ridiculous hoopty next to their brand new Accords and Civics. Just being in the same vicinity of it drops their value. No, they usually have a deal with or ownership in one of those lots. Those lots are in bad parts of town. The office usually looks like a tool shed. They offer financing at rates that would make a loan shark uneasy. Their cars usually have a lot of miles and are guaranteed only to make it off the lot. Some of them will even rig up the cars with tracking devices so their repo men can find you easier. That lot will sell this hunk of junk to the kind of person who, more than anyone else, needs it to start every day and get them to work. When your car breaks down, what do? Probably take it to the shop to get it fixed. What if you had no money and no credit cards? And what if you were a week into a job in which you were as replaceable as a number 2 pencil? Well, hope you don't have any kids. At least then you might be able to call a friend or family member to help you out. If you have kids, now you have to find someone to help you drive them to your childcare provider, which you can barely afford as it is anyhow, and take you to work. Then pick you and your kids up. If you don't have kids, you can probably at least take a cab today. And then you can fall into another trap. You can get a short-term loan at 300% APR. People who have credit don't get these loans because they're predatory and sketchy. They take advantage of people who have no other options. Ordinary people may know a little bit about them, but usually just say, what kind of stupid person gets themselves into that? Without realizing that it's not a stupid option so much as a last resort for many people in poverty. When you're poor, you pay for everything. Many things that other people don't have to pay for, or just don't have to worry about. This is one of the fatal flaws of the bootstrap mentality in which fixing poverty is simply a matter of will. When you're that far down, the deck is entirely stacked against you. The world is rigged to keep poor people poor. I had to move out on my own when I was 17. I had no money at all and drove an old clunker Camry. I got a flat tire to match the flat spare in the trunk. I went to the discount tire on the east side of Indianapolis, where I was living, to see if they could patch it. When they got it on the rack, they said that the belts were showing around the tire. In fact, all of the tires. And I would have to replace all 4 tires. I thanked them, went outside, sat in my car, and started crying. The manager came out and knocked on the window. He said that he had a set of tires that would fit my wheels that someone had left when they got new tires. I told him, thanks, but I didn't have any money. He told me not to worry about it and when I graduate to come back and buy my tires from them. You can get new car parts from the junkyard for virtually nothing, with added discounts if you remove them from the junkers yourself. I had a 12-year-old car in college, and when it blew a tire, I went to the junkyard and found a decent set of tires. I bought all 4 for $70, which reduced my food budget to $16 for the next 2 weeks. Some lady in the grocery store saw me with a calculator trying to figure out how much ramen I could buy with $16, and handed me a $20. It made me cry. I'm glad I'm not poor anymore, but I'll always remember that lady. The first 4 years of my life were spent in abject poverty. As a child, I would ask my mom if we could get a candy bar. She would explain to me at age 3 that we could get the candy bar, but if we did, it meant we couldn't afford a 2-liter of Coca-Cola. She would phrase it like so: if you get the candy bar, it'll be gone in a few days. But if you get the Coca-Cola, we can have Coca-Cola for a whole week. Amazingly, I knew enough to understand that Coca-Cola for over a week was a better deal than 2 days of a candy bar. As a side effect, I was regularly told no when I asked for things I wanted, mostly Lego sets or He-Man toys. Around age 6, my father's stake in a mineral prospecting company finally paid off. Turns out he had been putting every dime he had into it since before I was born. We went from surviving on mayonnaise sandwiches to having 2015's equivalent of $10,300 per month in income. My little sister was around 2 or so at this time, and she was getting everything she wanted. For the first 6 years of my life, I had learned that asking for things I wanted would always end with no, so I never asked for anything. My parents weren't able to put it together until my grandmother got very sick and came to live with us. The whole family went out shopping, and my grandmother knew I loved Legos, but I didn't ask for a set of them. Meanwhile, my little sister had a Barbie doll and a My Little Pony in each hand. She stopped and asked me, "Poster, don't you want a Lego set?" Mommy and Daddy always tell me no, Grandma, we can't afford them. I only have a vague memory of this, but before she died, my grandmother told me this story and said that my mom broke down in tears in the middle of the store, sobbing. My dad had a look of defeated failure on his face, according to her. Apparently, it simply never occurred to them the reason I never asked for anything was because I had always been told no. For Christmas, I got 3 Lego Technic sets. It's not the things we bought. I grew up in a level of poverty in the entire 1980s and some of the 1990s that modern politicians will swear to you doesn't occur in modern America. After all, we have food stamps and welfare, and anyone still poor after that is obviously just a lazy addict bum. It's not the things we bought. We lived on powdered milk and rice and ramen, and before that, old wonton soup packets that I just realized don't exist anymore, and government cheese, and bread from the discount rack at the local bakery, about 9 minutes away from growing mold. But hey, at least it was only 19 cents a loaf. It's the things we scavenged. Hauling food out of the dumpster at 7-Eleven because they threw away piles of chip bags that were a day over their expiration. The manager caught us one day, and they apparently told the employees to stab a hole in each chip bag after that. Eventually, we just had to sniff each bag to make sure nothing was contaminated. We would check neighbors' trash bins as well, rescuing half a pizza some idiots had ordered the night before then threw away after a handful of slices. We would haul in furniture from alleyways. My youngest sibling, my sister, received a twin bed mattress that had a grotesque brown stain on it. It looked like someone had pooped a gallon of wet feces onto it. We didn't care though. We scrubbed that down with bleach over and over, and she slept on it for years. And then there were times when the welfare checks or food stamps didn't arrive, and the trash bins were not producing food. I grew up in a fairly rural area, and what did we do when that happened? Well, I know that in the winter, gray squirrel tastes pretty gross. Sure, people from the south can claim that their brown and red squirrels are delicious, but I would rather eat poop out of a pig's butt than eat another bite of squirrel meat, or jackrabbit, or dandelion greens. I guess I'm just saying that it's not what insanely poor people buy since they're insanely poor. They can't afford to buy anything. You can keep the electricity and rent paid, or you can, nope, there's not another choice. Food, medicine, clothing, furnishings, blankets, all of this is stuff you can pull out of the garbage. Powdered milk. I once worked in a call center, and an old lady called almost in tears that cable went up by $1.50. Her line that she repeated more than once was that she couldn't afford fresh milk and had to buy powdered milk. Unless it's due to a lack of refrigeration available or some sort of allergy, only the very poor would buy powdered over fresh milk. I knew a guy who, when he would get sick, would go to a livestock feed store and buy antibiotics and other meds that were meant for farm animals. There was another med he'd get at pet stores too. He would just cut the pills into smaller pieces and try to guess what the proper milligram amount was. It's apparently crazy cheap for certain meds, and doesn't require a prescription or government oversight like it would at a normal pharmacy. I had a really odd childhood. Until age 9, my family would have been classed as upper middle class. Then my father left and my mom just went crazy. From 9 to 18, we were dirt poor. I remember being 10 years old and our weekly treat was to go to the Little Woods Cafe, and they did a 99 pence 5-piece breakfast. We shared that among my mom, brother, sister, and me. One of us got the extra item. We'd take turns. As an adult, I've made sure my children will never know poverty because of excellent memories like that. Nothing motivates you more than memories of fighting over a solitary sausage. A buddy of mine went through a tough time a few years back, and I didn't know about it until he told me about a year ago. One thing that stuck with me was that he just made enough money to survive. By survive, I meant literally enough money to pay rent, utilities, and the cheapest, worst food he could buy. He couldn't afford transportation, not even the bus. He told me about a span of a few months he went through where he literally only ate water, dry noodles, and peanut butter for a few months. He worked at a restaurant and they'd cut his hours. He couldn't find other work. His first big reality check was that he had to sell his car to make rent one month. The next month, he started selling other unnecessary items, like his old TV, some other appliances, and his nicer clothes. So he got to the point where he was literally doing his laundry with dish soap in his sink. He couldn't afford deodorant, razors, or any of the things that we take for granted, so he'd steal them from the grocery store. He didn't like to do it, but he had no choice. He never got caught. When he told me all of this, I was floored. I wish he would have told me when it was happening. I would have helped any way I could. At that time, I was by no means living a fancy lifestyle, but I could have thrown him a 20 here and there to help him put some groceries in the house or some TP in the bathroom. In university, I used to buy 10 to 20 pound bags of potatoes, freeze-dried chives, and gravy mix in bulk. Not the supermarket packs which are $1 for 2 cups of gravy. Restaurant-sized packs that make 8 liters. That was often dinner, usually at the end of the month when money got tight. Sometimes I had even saved enough that I could have mashed potatoes with some sort of dairy or bacon grease. I also had a cheap tub of protein powder for weightlifters, and it was gross. But I would blend it up, usually with water, and hold my nose and gulp it down. It was actual protein, and slightly more healthy than a week-long diet of potatoes. Learning the times of the day when meat, bakery, fish, vegetable, and miscellaneous items are reduced to 75% off at the local supermarket. I've been learning this for years, but it's a good day when you find 400 grams of fresh mince for 99 pence, and you have a warm, filling food that you used to take for granted when living with parents. One thing I've noticed about being poor is that you become almost vegetarian, because meat just costs too much, fresh or frozen. Another thing would be buying the cheapest large container of yogurt and mixing it in jam for fruity yogurt. But that's not about being poor, that's just a good idea. At-home surgery. Used a pair of needle nose pliers, a razor blade, and some antiseptic superglue to remove a cyst on my forehead. The secret is to cut in a cat's eye shape, quickly push the skin back after you pull the cyst out, don't let it pop, and get the glue on fast. It hurts a lot, but it bleeds a lot and you have to get it on quick to stop the bleeding. Bags of frozen veggies and a couple packets of ramen can make a family meal. I used to buy these awful frozen chicken discs wrapped in bacon. They were terrible, filled with gristle and just nasty. Eating those with rice and frozen corn was a real treat. I ate mac and cheese every day for about 2 to 3 years because that was all I could cook while my mom worked. I could have made SpaghettiOs, but I hated those. That for dinner, and one of those cheap 99-cent packed donuts from the grocery store for breakfast. Lunch was a bologna sandwich and an apple. Finally, when I was about 10 or 11, I started teaching myself how to cook from my mom's old cookbook, so my meals got a lot better. All carbs and cheap fats, scalloped potatoes, rice, and cheap meats. My local bus service used to have paper transfers, so you'd pay your fare, get the paper transfer that was good for an hour, and then you'd use it for the next bus. But if you were only going to the station, you'd get a paper transfer anyway, then hang around the station for an extra 5 minutes to see if anyone needed it. Conversely, you'd wait around for people getting off the bus to see if you could score someone's transfer. This only worked if you weren't switching buses, but I got quite a few free rides this way, and gave many transfers away. Also, going without meds, living in constant pain because you can't afford a prescription. I remember laying in my bed at night, and my mom would be sobbing in her bed from pain because she couldn't afford the meds that would treat her rheumatoid arthritis or anything but generic Tylenol for her pain. I guess that's not really buying anything, but while we're on memory lane, there was also saving your birthday money from your grandma and aunts and uncles, so you could pay for a babysitting course that lets you babysit at 12. Got a babysitting job at 12 and babysat every day from 3 until 7 or 8 to earn some money. I'd give that money to my dad so he can pay his phone bill and put gas in the car. I got a real job at 14, working at a fast food restaurant so I could eat dirt cheap. Still gave my dad money, but this time knowing it was going to the casino or the bar, but still doing it anyway. Having worked in a dollar store, I saw some people come through who had to be pretty thrifty. First was dollar store steaks. Seriously, steaks for $1. If that doesn't sound sketchy, I don't know what does. Second, this was also a Hispanic thing I noticed. Fabuloso. That stuff cleans everything. I had no clue what it was till I grabbed a busted bottle to clean the bathroom one day. Third, you also get really used to pasta and rice. They're cheap and can be bought in bunches. And lastly, everyone bought 2 sandwiches from Subway because a third is free. Coupons like this go a long way. One last thing I noticed, and this is pretty bad, the dollar store's toilet paper is seriously better than the toilet paper my mom buys. Sacrificing my plate of food to feed my little brother and 3 little sisters whilst my mom gave up her food as well. I was 10 when this was happening, all while my obese, abusive stepdad ate steak and Brussels sprouts, lest my mom got beat. Luckily, he's gone now. Mom's somewhat stable and I'm 17. I'm saving up money right now, but that's one thing I fear being. I don't want to be hungry or unable to provide. I just remember telling my mom that I'm hungry and her breaking down and crying. Luckily, I had a best friend that I used to go to and bring leftovers from across the street back over. About a year ago, I was addicted to alcohol, 4,000 kilometers from home, dropped out of school, and living in my 20-year-old car. I got so used to eating microwave potatoes that I considered walking into a 7-Eleven and pocketing a handful of mayo packets while pretending to buy a hot dog. A special treat. I grew up distinctly middle class and generally didn't want for much. My recent experience has really put into perspective the difficulties experienced by people who are or have been in similar situations to myself, but bear the burden of direct responsibility to kids and family. Things have gotten a lot better since I've accepted the help of other people. Seriously, even relatively tiny gestures of kindness will go a long way with someone who's literally struggling for survival. Never underestimate the impact you can have upon another person's life. I'd probably be dead by now if it weren't for the unconditional love and support of friends, family, and random strangers. Instead, I'm 25, relatively healthy again, and back in school trying to finish off my engineering degree. It's not really about what you buy, it's about what you can make or substitute. Can't afford to run to the gas to run the stove and want that French toast? Toast the bread on the barbecue, grill melt some butter, and sprinkle cinnamon sugar on it. Can't afford real spaghetti? Mix some tomato soup and butter. Heat till warm, pour over some ramen, and you have yourself some poor man's spaghetti. You'd also be surprised what you can get for almost free at garage sales or online. Teachers of Reddit, they say there are no stupid questions, but what's the most stupid question a student has ever asked you? Not a question, but more a statement that prompted a whole discussion when I was student teaching. To set the stage, I'd like to point out that I'm white and my leading teacher was African American, and the classroom was about 60% African American, 30% Latino, and the remaining 10% a mixture of Asian and white. This was also my advanced class, and we were discussing the apartheid in Africa. Me. So the black Africans and white Africans, and I immediately get interrupted. A student raises their hand. Miss Ducky, you can't say that. Me. Say what? Student. Black. It's African American. Me, trying my hardest not to die a little inside. No, that is actually not the correct phrase. Can anyone tell me why African American is not the correct term for this situation? I'm met with silence. Me. Okay guys, look at it this way. Are we talking about Americans? No, we're not. We're talking about a racial issue in Africa with no relation to America at all. The definition of African American is a person of African descent living in America. So if the people we're talking about are not American, they can't be African American, can they? So to talk about the racial issue, the labels are used as black Africans and white Africans, as outlined by our textbook. Student. No, you can't say that. They're African American. At this point, my lead teacher is facepalming. She's in total disbelief, and as much as she loved to watch me struggle, she stepped in and tried to explain it as well. 20 minutes go by of the two of us really trying our best. The bell ends up ringing, the kids still couldn't figure out, and I think we both nearly cried. Grade 5 Sex Ed. I had a rule that any question can be asked, but I might ask you to ask your parents instead of me. I heard a story about a man who put his stuff into muffins and then fed it to grade 1 kids. Well, that's pretty disgusting, and I would think that person would go to jail for doing that. Wouldn't the girls get pregnant from eating it? And before I could say anything, another student blurted out, "No, they wouldn't get pregnant. They haven't gone through puberty yet." I'm thankful for days when kids remind me that they're still kids. I actually had a student ask me, "What are those pyramid-shaped things in Egypt called?" I've never seen a class laugh that hard before. I once projected a picture of the Earth onto the front whiteboard. A student asked, "How do astronauts stand on a planet like that?" This was an 8th grade student being totally serious. 9th grade ELA, a few chapters into Of Mice and Men. What kind of work does George do on the farm? I'm not sure. Probably the same work that everyone else is doing. Oh, it must be hard for him to help out since he's a mouse. At the college midterm, I had a guy come up to me that I've never seen in class. He proceeded to ask me what his grade is. I checked the sheet, and he never turned in a single piece of homework, no quizzes, and never attended a test. What did you think you'd have? You got a solid F. After a lengthy explanation of the effects of volcanic eruptions on human communities, I had a grade 6 student ask me why on earth people even make volcanic eruptions. While I was student teaching, I had a student ask where Texas was on the map I was projecting on the screen. The map was of China. I'm a private writing instructor. A couple of years ago, I had a student ask me if commas were real or imaginary. He was equally dubious about semicolons, which he referred to as imitation periods. He was 26 and very serious. In 7th grade science during sex ed, they were talking about oral sex. A Mormon girl in class said, "Wait, you can get an STD just from talking about sex?" I wouldn't call the question stupid, just no exposure at all to the topic beforehand. I was asked by a crying student once if there was a second moon. We were outside for recess, and as happens sometimes, the moon was visible. I said no. Why? And she pointed to the moon and asked, "But aren't the sun and moon the same thing?" 4th grade student, not special needs or anything. She was crying because the other kids were making fun of her for thinking the sun and the moon were the same thing. After I explained to her that the sun did not turn into the moon at night and then back into the sun in the morning, I did an impromptu science lesson that afternoon with the whole class. This came up all the time when I was teaching kids how to do their taxes. I must have had this conversation a dozen times. "Sir, I don't know what to do with this part." What does the instruction say on the line? "Add box 23 and 24 and write the answer here." So add box 23 and 24. I, to this day, have no idea how you teach someone to follow very explicit instructions. As part of teaching US government, I ran a zombie apocalypse scenario where the students had to respond to an ongoing crisis in real time, using the actual powers of the government as different parts of the government. It was my favorite activity all semester, and I went all in, including a large map of the US that would be updated every day that passed. As part of this activity, I prepared a handout of a fake news story about the zombie apocalypse beginning in our hometown. It had pictures of zombies shambling around and was written all newspaper style. One day after handing these out, an 18-year-old student raised their hand and said, "Mr. Poster, did this really happen?" I had a pupil ask me if the sun they saw in America was the same as the sun we saw here in Scotland, and why was their sun so much warmer? In health class, while going over reproduction, there was a student who raised her hand and asked if you were sterile, could you pass it on to your children? The whole class giggled, and she, confused, said she was serious. She wanted to know if you're sterile, could you pass it on to your kids? I said to her, "Okay, let's think about this. What does it mean to be sterile?" She started answering, "It means you can't have Oh. Followed by another round of laughter from the rest of the class. For sex ed class, we had a box where students could submit questions anonymously. One day, one of the questions asked, "My dad's bits are circumcised, but not mine. Does this mean he isn't my dad?" Yeah, they believed circumcision was hereditary. I used to do volunteer teaching at an after-school program for 14-year-olds. We were doing a project that involved balloons. One boy had blown his balloon but couldn't get it tied. I tied it and gave it back to him. He immediately tossed it up. As it sank to the floor, his face fell. Obviously disappointed, he asked, "Aw, so they're not helium?" Warm spring day, no AC. Fan blowing in the front of the room. Hand goes up. "Can you make the fan ovulate?" No, I cannot. My wife is a teacher, but this is my favorite story of hers. They were discussing how Native Americans relied on hunting buffalo and used all parts of it for food, clothing, shelter, etc. In reference to how they used the buffalo for shelter, one student asked, "So do they stack the buffalo on top of each other?" This one kid in my 10th grade biology class takes the cake for me. We were going over chromosomes, talking about the effects of an extra chromosome, Down syndrome, and this kid looks confused as hell, gears turning like mad in his head. Finally, he raises his hand. With the extra chromosome, shouldn't they be like superheroes? Most of the idiotic questions I get are linked to history, even though I'm an English teacher. They have no idea about different time periods or a sense of centuries. So I would get questions like, why didn't Dickens just get on a plane? Was the internet not around then? Then being the 1700s. Were the Victorians around when dinosaurs were? And these are 14 to 16-year-olds. It gets even harder for them when thinking about the few decades prior to their existence, i.e. the 50s through 90s. I wonder if we're all like that a little when we're so young. I was a teacher's assistant for a geography class. I had been the teacher's assistant for this class for 3 semesters, and the professor had decided to retire. New professor comes in and tries to make this class as not boring that it could possibly be. In her defense, she did teach the class with enthusiasm. Anyway, the second project for the class was a short presentation about different resources of the world, renewable energy, non-renewable, etc. I tell 90+ students and email every single one of them to email me their presentation when they're done, and I'll put them on a list for the order of presentations. I get a good 60 to 75 presentations. The week of presentations, I sent out an email with the list and get a good 10 or so emails back asking why they weren't on the list. I calmly explain to them the aforementioned instructions and send out a new list. On the first day, 5 more students ask me the same question. A bit irritated, I explain to them as well and announce it to the class once more. The list gets very long, and the students' lack of preparation continues. Presentations get extended to 2 or more weeks, and in those 2 weeks, the stragglers email me. At this point, I've lost my hope in humanity, and I just get more and more irritated. I had done everything to ensure that every one of those students knew what to do for presentations, even if they were out sick. They still had an email that they needed to check in case an announcement was made. It stuck with me for the rest of the semester, and I found out from my professor that some students complained about me as being the worst and rudest TA they ever had. This one is one of my favorites. I had one of my choir students sitting there studying her hands for about 10 minutes. She wasn't really singing, just quizzically looking at both sides of her hands. So I finally asked what was so interesting about her hands. Her response? "Well, I was wondering, are gloves like underwear for your hands?" No, they're not. Later that year, she was also surprised to learn that helicopters were started inside the cabin of the helicopter and not by a gigantic ripcord pulled by a bunch of people. Let me give you a bit of context first. I teach social science in Sweden, ages 16 to 18, and this particular question came from an 18-year-old. We had been working on a theme about crime, punishment, and legislation, and we had devoted a couple of hours on the issue of file sharing, whether it should be legal or illegal, the morality of it, etc. So, on the test, I included a question about file sharing, both because I knew we had covered it in class and because I knew that every single one of them was guilty of file sharing. As I always do when handing out a text or quiz, I ask my students to read all questions before starting to answer them. As they started reading the questions, one of them looks up at me and asks, "Mr. Poster, what is file sharing?" There was a moment of complete and utter silence in the classroom, and then his classmates opened up on him. And my God, they were savage. The thing is, he just experienced a temporary brain freeze. Test nerves, probably. And I could see in his eyes right after he asked the question that it dawned on him. To his credit, he took it like a champ. Just sat there and nodded as he got roasted so bad that not even the best burn ward would have taken him in as salvageable. 10th grade honors chemistry. Topic is states of matter. What would liquid ice be called? We're still not sure if he was making a joke about the short-lived icebreaker mints, liquid ice, because everyone was laughing too hard. Elementary student after leaving their backpack on the bus. Someone should invent some sort of device that attaches a backpack to a person's body so they don't lose it. I'm a casual lecturer and have a young family, so only work the hours I'm paid. Quite often, I'll get a student not show for the entire semester, then in the last week appear and ask why I can't teach them out of hours. There have been tears and complaints when I basically said that if they'd shown up to class, they'd know what they were doing, and I have better things to do with my life than support lazy students. If you drink too much Gatorade and fill up to here, points at throat, do you drown? You know there's stuff in your body and you're not just a hollow tank, right? Here's my personal favorite. We were watching documentaries in black and white. I think about the Great Depression. A kid raises his hand and I call on him. He says, "Never mind, it's a stupid question." I say, "There are no stupid questions. Go ahead." He proceeds with, "Did they have color back then? Like in real life?" I was dumbfounded and could not keep a straight face. Turns out there are stupid questions. Whenever I have a professor that tells us to ask anything because there are no stupid questions, I immediately raise my hand and ask, why do meteorites always land in craters? My cousin is a teacher, and one day he had to teach a sex ed unit to the class. You know, the ones where everyone splits off into boy and girl groups so that they can put any question in a hat and have it answered anonymously. He's a guy, so he was answering the questions for the boys. So he got some questions that were clearly looking for stupid answers and threw them out. As usual, certain jokers were trying to get a rise out of him. Then he got a question that asked, why do you have to have an erection to have sex with a girl? This one he couldn't avoid. He didn't know if it was serious or not, so he decided he would have to answer it. He said, "You know how you have the plastic tip on the end of your shoelaces to get it in the hole? It's kind of like that." This may be the greatest metaphor I ever personally heard of. We're getting ready for a field trip in a class of about 20. I make the announcement, we're leaving in about 10 minutes, go to the bathroom and fill up your water bottles. Everyone's getting ready and standing around, and one of my students comes to me in a panic. Excuse me, have we left yet?" We all look around at everyone standing by the door or by their desks. No, I don't think we've left yet. Good grief. I was only student teaching at the time. It was a high school biology class on human reproduction unit. We're talking about sperm. My mentor teacher asks, "So what is the purpose of glucose in human sperm?" A student replied in a genuine manner, "So that it tastes sweet?" Not really a question, but an answer to a question. I was teaching a world history course to 10th graders and asked the question, what does AD mean? A couple kids took a shot but were wrong, and a girl who fit the absolute textbook description of a stereotypical cheerleader raised her hand and answered as confidently as someone would answer that the sky is blue or grass is green with, "After dinosaurs." I'm a teacher in an urban district with a high immigrant population. I've been asked why people don't fall off the bottom of the earth, if anyone lives on Mars, if Jewish people really are aliens, etc. Neither the questions nor the students were truly stupid. Many students had simply been raised in areas with little or no formal education, or by parents who themselves were incredibly negligent, superstitious, and/or uninformed. I teach history and religion. As I was driving with one of my students, I passed a church that I briefly attended my freshman year of college. Pointing it out, I mentioned that they were a fundamentalist Protestant church, and I asked her if she knew the history of that church. And I kid you not, her literal and immediate response was, "Yeah, aren't they the ones who followed Martin Luther King Jr. when he broke off from the Anglican church but kept everything almost exactly the same?" Yeah, she somehow blended 3 separate religious reformations from 3 very different periods of time, confused which churches were a part of those reformations, and somehow threw the American Civil Rights movement in there. It was pretty bad. We were discussing the plight of African Americans during Reconstruction. If black people had such a bad time in America, why did they immigrate here? I immediately saw the black kid behind her sit up and silently mouth, "What the F?" Sadly, this was in a high school honors course. I will say in the girl's defense, she immediately knew how idiotic that question was and turned bright red. Cringeworthy moment for all. I'm a teacher, and there really are no stupid questions from students. And if you read the responses, you'll see that they're mostly just questions from genuinely curious kids who have big gaps in their knowledge or understanding, which is not their fault, but the fault of previous teachers, their parents, or something they've read or heard about only in passing and misunderstood. The only questions that frustrate me are the ones that are willfully ignorant or are asked as a joke and derail good discussions, or by a student that ignored my long and detailed instructions asking me the exact question I just spent minutes answering. But when you're dealing with 12 to 14-year-olds, it comes with the territory, and it's all entirely forgivable. And I'm a teacher to help them learn how to be thoughtful humans. My parents used to teach identical 6th grade science curriculum at 2 different schools and grade papers at home together. They would read the dumbest answers aloud, one-upping each other until they had a winner. The only answer I remember clearly was to the question, what is the smallest thing in the universe? One kid answered, about the size of 2 potatoes. I teach 2nd grade in Massachusetts, but I'm originally from Texas, so I had someone from home be pen pals with my class. My kids were writing letters to their pen pals. They're supposed to tell them something about themselves and then ask them some questions. Miss Poster, do they speak English in Texas? Do I speak English? Yes. Am I from Texas? Yes. So what do you think the answer to your question might be? Maybe? So we spent the day talking about the Japanese attack and America's entrance into World War II. Student number 1, wait, is Pearl Harbor still alive? Raucous laughter until student number 2, of course she's dead. I was teaching a history class that was learning about the invasion of the Huns and the fall of Rome. During silent reading, a student raised their hand and called me over. He asked me, were these like half horse people? I was really confused and asked why he thought that. It says here they were skilled horsemen. I told him that just meant they were good at riding horses, not that they were centaurs. I teach 4th grade, and a student did some great work, and I made an offhanded comment about how I love my job. Another student asked, what's your job? I teach preschool, so I could go on and on about dumb things. But my favorite is this story. During group time one day, I couldn't help but notice one of my kids had a very strong poop odor. I pulled him aside and asked if he had had an accident. He proudly said no, and that he made it just in time. I suggested he go wipe again and double check. About 5 minutes later, he comes to me with his hands covered in poop. He said I didn't tell him what to wipe with, so he just used his hands. I was holding study hall for 11th and 12th graders. From the back of the room, a few students began arguing back and forth. When I asked what was going on, one of the girls looked me straight in the eye and asked, is it true that you can still get pregnant from anal sex? I ultimately was forced to get an anatomy book and hold a mini health class. I had a kid in 7th grade ask me how people decide which day is their birthday. When I explained to him that your birthday is the day you were born and you don't get to choose it, he couldn't believe it and acted as if I told him he just won a million candy bars. I think the dumbest question I've heard went along the lines of, isn't it a fact that conservatives just want to conserve money and liberals just want to liberate people in need? This kid's a senior in college and has been a part of 2 major elections. Like, come on, man, how do you not know the difference? Chemistry teacher here. I'm regularly asked, can I drink this, miss? When students work with chemicals. The solution is bright blue with a hazard label on it. What do you think? When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.